Hey, sorry there, I was just getting things set up around here. Why, may you ask? Well, that's because it's Halloween, of course! That time of year where I get to be extra spooky for these episodes. To orchestrate that point, I'm gonna do something really scary in precisely 2 seconds. Oh, hi, sorry. Mind the mess, we're just getting things set up around here. I would like to take you all back to the scariest month of them all. The middle of May. I was scrolling on my phone instead of actually doing my job while slacking off. And while I was doing so, I found this video. Gregory Horror Show, but it's only Judgment Boy. This title was absolute nonsense to me. What is a Gregory Horror Show? What's a Judgment Boy? What does any of this mean? I was intrigued. I needed to know what this meant. But little did I know, that little decision would irreparably alter the trajectory of my life over the coming months. Such a small decision that could really spiral into this giant butterfly effect of a several month-long obsession. I hope you're ready for what comes next, because it's time we talk about Gregory Horror Show.
Would you like a room?
What am I looking at? Gregory Horror Show is a Japanese anime aired in 1999. And as much as I would love to dive into the backstory behind the show, because really just look at it, come on. I can't, because I've scoured the entire internet for any information about the development of this series, and I can't find anything. It was made by a man known as Naomi Iwata, the English dub was created by a Canadian dubbing team known as Blue Water Studios, and that's all she wrote. And it frustrates me because you cannot tell me with a straight face a show that looks like this airing in 1999 wouldn't have a crazy cool backstory behind it. Whatever the case is, Gregory Horror Show is some kind of purgatory where lost souls gather in a place known as Gregory House. Kinda like a hotel, but evil and spooky. The whole show itself is broken into around 88 episodes, which are all about 3 minutes each, and consist of 4 seasons. Unlike most shows, it's kind of an anthology, where each season stars a new main character, with the season prior not really mattering to the next one. I'll do overviews of the first 2, then dive into more detail. It'll make more sense as we go along, trust me. Seasons 1 and 2 are both from the first person perspective, and kind of has the audience as the main character more than anything. As you watch through the episodes, a loose plot gets strung along as the main character meets more wacky faces living in the hotel. And specifically for the first 3 seasons, having a big problem the protagonist needs to overcome, usually tying to the theme of the season. You'll catch on to what I mean as we go through them. And even though you can watch it in any order, I'm going to be going season by season because that makes more sense in my brain. And as I go along, I'll introduce more and more characters that are big players in each specific season. And since this is a horror series, I think I should probably rattle off some trigger warnings for this one. So if you have a fear of needles, blood loss, zombification, sacrifices... Actually, hold on, let me pull up the wiki here. And finally, some light gore. Alright, doesn't sound too bad. Oh. Alright, enough stalling. Let's finally watch Gregory Horror Show Season 1. Our main protagonist gets a name later, but isn't given one right now, so I'll be calling him Jim for the time being. Jim is an average man who winds up in Gregory House after walking home from work and getting lost. Season 1 serves to mainly introduce a bunch of characters and also just completely f**k with the main character. Like, they put him through the ringer, man. Since every episode consists of a 25-second intro where the character gives some foreshadowing about what's about to happen in the current episode, or reminiscing about the events of the last one, we get 2 minutes per episode. And because of such a short length, we usually play around with 1 new character per thing. Like the first episode where we get introduced to our debatably main character for the entire franchise, Gregory. Gregory is a stinky little rat man who runs around this horrid hotel, and specifically for this season is the main antagonist, typically ushering in other guests to come mess with the poor Jim. It starts with just little glimpses of the other guests, like this mysterious carousel looking guy named Judgment Boy going past his room, then ramps up a bit when Jim leaves his room to go check out a sealed door with a different guest in it. And this is where we get introduced to our first new guest. Neko Zombie is a cat who somehow has his most notable feature being his Zach Keith shirt. I mean, sure, do your thing, also wear shirts with my favorite executioners on them. I don't really think his character has a deeper meaning behind it besides from orchestrating how cruel the hotel is. The reason I specifically point that out is because every cryptid in this monstrous motel has a quality that relates to Jimbo, like Night 7 and Mummy Dog. Mummy Dog and his dad Mummy Papa both have sharp objects jabbed into their head, but they both keep insisting that they have a splitting headache they can't shake. In my opinion, season, they are a metaphor for an obvious problem being right in front of you and you're refusing to see it, believing it's something else causing the issue. And while I'm talking about the guests, let's rattle off all of them as they appear in season 1. After that, I can then discuss what all of it actually means. Trust me, this will make more sense somehow. I've already talked about Neko Zombie and Gregory, but next up is Lost Doll. She's a little girl who's constantly looking around for her aptly mentioned lost doll, not realizing she is said doll. Well, at least half of her is. She has a thing where her head spins around and she becomes the doll. Her gimmick is that she's being driven by a long-lost connection to another. Alright, this next one isn't exactly a metaphor with themselves, but how the main character reacts to them is. Hell's chef is the cook for the petrifying public house, and literally cannot be criticized or else they will kill you. Also, the food is poisoned, also they cooked a man into this dish. Them and the next guest just go at lengths to show the complicitness of Jim. Not fighting back at all, just eating the food. Also, hey, who is our next guest? Alright, you have 3 seconds to turn on your volume or put on headphones.
There's nothing like the feeling I get from doing this.
So, Catherine here makes me really uncomfortable, okay? Like, I guess that's the point of the horror in a way, but damn, I just don't like this one. I guess that technically makes her the best character in the show since she's the best at making me unnerved, but I just don't like it. She is a nurse staying here who drains gallons of blood from people's bodies. Something about the main character subbing, please let's move on. I'm skipping over the person who inspired this video for now and go straight to Cactus Gunman. Cactus Gunman is a cowboy stereotype who barges into the room and demands Jim to fight him in a duel. He doesn't know who this guy is or why he's fighting to the death, but just that he does. Because of Jim's avoidance of confrontation, he doesn't shoot back in order to save his life, instead just lets it happen. Obviously they wouldn't just kill the main character here. Cactus Gunman misses and shoots Gregory in the head. But these last 3 have just hammered in how unconfrontational the main protagonist is, putting his life on the line several times in order to avoid a fight. And the next one is one of my personal favorites, TV Fish. Not really doing anything overly reflective of the main character, just showing how much this place has warped him, barely even managing to remember his own family now. I also just like it because how cool this design looks. You can tell I liked it because it's relevant twice in the whole series and it's in the thumbnail. Alright, up next are the 2 characters I simply don't understand. Payphone and Clockmaster are just kind of here, I guess. Payphone just kind of swindles Jim out of 20 bucks. I don't know what he's supposed to represent besides the dreariness of Gregory House. And Clockmaster and his son have control over time. They're a lot more important later, trust me, moving on. So this is the point this season where things start to follow a bit more of a linear path. Now every episode moves to the next one as Jim is fully submitted to Gregory House's ways, literally saying in one of the intros that he's just conforming to whatever the beastly bed and breakfast has in store for him. He gets flushed down a toilet by a character I refuse to spend more than a second talking about, then ending up in a game show hellscape run by a living roulette board. Then after completing the board game, he lands on a roller coaster known as the Speed Mouse, which sends him flying into an abyss. All of this just serves to scrape away slowly at our main character's psyche. Jim constantly just getting forced through hell at Gregory's amusement is so disturbing to watch, especially where he ends up after the Speed Mouse. The Mirror Room, which is the domain of the Mirror Man. You see, the mirrors in this room don't reflect Jim. This is because Jim lacks substance. Jim is barely alive, metaphorically and literally. Yes, he lives, but he's not living. Why is that? Well, I think it's time to start actually explaining what's going on here. At multiple points in the series, it's hinted at who Jim actually is. He has 2 kids, a wife, a dead-end job. When he appears as a character in later seasons, his name is literally Hanawa Salaryman. F***ing salary is in his name. His entire existence is a simile for work culture as a whole. People working 2 jobs just to support a family they barely get any time to actually see. That's why when TV Fish showed his memories, he barely remembered them. That's what Lost Doll was meant to represent, his constant drive to keep working and working for a family he's barely a part of anymore. He's not a man, he's a cog in the machine he is powerless to not help run. And of course, he's pathetic. Instead of standing up against anything that's happening to him, he just lets it happen in an attempt to avoid confrontation. Like Mummy Dog, his biggest problem is right in front of his face. And I think no character drives home his inability to act more than the one I glazed over earlier. Judgment Boy. Judgment Boy is, thing. I honestly don't even know how to describe this character design. Chandelier, I guess? Sure, let's roll with that. Judgment Boy is a chandelier thing that moves around Gregory House judging people's souls, and seeing what they value most. Money or love. And asking Jim, who I'm just gonna keep calling Jim instead of his actual name, questions he doesn't get to answer. Instead, Judgment Boy answering them for him. They all just involve a simple moral dilemma. Like, hold on, I think I can do this off the top of my head.
You're a businessman.
Today you will sign a major contract that will change your life. But your girlfriend who you love has just been hit by a car. If you go to the hospital, you'll lose that contract.
But when he says money versus love, he doesn't really mean it. He more is referring to selfish desires versus selfless desires. Like his second question later in season 1, where he gives the main character another hypothetical. You're in the 2nd grade playing with your friend after class, when you knock over a vase and have to own up to the teacher, where he judges our main character's soul and says he would blame his friend. But you see, that's where I've been kind of lying about Judgment Boy. Skipping ahead a little bit, when he appears in season 2, he gives that character a hypothetical as well. But instead of it being a hypothetical, it's a real event that happened. So who is to say that the events Judgment Boy in season 1 is talking about aren't true as well? So why does any of this stuff matter? Well, it orchestrates the point I was getting at. If these events are real, like I speculate they are, well that means Jim's inability to act made him miss his girlfriend's death, and his avoidance of confrontation made him blame his friend on something he totally did. He's such a good character, man. I love everything about this little shitter. Especially his design, like come on. I don't even know what you would call this thing. He has 10 tons of weight wearing him down, 2 poles I wouldn't dare call arms holding cages containing a heart and dollar sign, and to wrap it all up, a chain connecting him to the ceiling. I think I'll take a small break from dissecting the themes of the show, and then instead talk about the show itself, like the characters. I love these character designs. They'll have this pseudo papercraft look to them that makes everything feel so charming. Even when there's brutal gore like Gregory getting shot, it feels so hard to be grossed out by it because of how cartoony everything looks. But that's not to say the show can't get disturbing at times, believe you me, it does. I've already shown Catherine and her disgusting pleasures from killing people, but Judgment Boy is a great example of how unnerving things can be. Let me just play you a clip that accentuates my point.
You chose the contract, and in the meantime, your girlfriend dies alone in her hospital bed. It was your choice. You get to live with it. Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy.
Lines like that are just so good at making everything feel so isolated. They play music in the show a lot, like when Cactus Gunman enters, or pretty much during the entirety of Neko Zombie's showcase. But I love when they're trying to make the viewers feel uncomfortable, all music completely disappears. They really try and make you feel like you're being there, told these things, and experiencing these events. The sound design of the heart-shattering paired up with Judgment Boy's deadpan line delivery is so excellently done. Another way the show excels at making you feel like you're there is the camera. I think this genuinely might be the first horror series to my knowledge where everything is a POV. Sure, this is common in horror nowadays, with stuff like the Blair Witch Project or any analog horror franchise. Okay, technically the Blair Witch Project and Gregory were all at the same year, but you get my point. But this was 1999 here, people. The same year SpongeBob came out, the same year The Iron Giant came out, the same year the impeachment trial of Ronald Reagan came out. This predated so much. And with how passive and non-committal our main character is, it's so good at making you feel like you're the one in the horrifying hotel. This is also an incredibly smart decision for saving on assets. You don't need to animate a main character when the main character is never on screen. It's just such a cool idea across the board. I honestly don't think the show would work nearly as well if it didn't have all of these small things compiling. It's like the opposite of the death of a thousand paper cuts expression. This show has so many little things that all add up to it being so cool. The humongous cast, the aesthetics, the sound design, it gives such a creepy atmosphere with also being so enjoyable to watch as a non-horror fan like myself. Even though a lot of the guests are static characters, I still feel attached to a lot of them. Gregory is a fun little rat man, I love Lost Doll conceptually, and of course Judgment Boy. There's a reason this guy was a Tumblr sexy man for a while. And it's so strange to say he's my favorite character because he literally doesn't have a personality. He just says shit in a cool voice that pisses off I love him. One of the reasons I think he's so beloved is because outside of Gregory and obviously Jim, he's the most recurring character in the entirety of season 1. He doesn't even seem like he's on anybody's side either. Like in his second appearance, he gives that hypothetical with the broken vase, then gives one to Gregory about his mother and a chunk of cheese dangling off a cliff, which is also the same episode we get introduced to an actual antagonist. I say we keep going with the story of the show for now though. After escaping the mirror room, Jim finds his way to a safe with a bird on top of it. I have honestly no idea what the implications of this scene are. He gets his heart from inside of it, something about hiding his true feelings away. Yeah, no clue with this one. But after Gregory fails to stop Jim from getting his heart for some reason, because that was important, we finally get to see Gregory's mom. They never give her a real name, so I'm just going to keep calling her Mama, as the show does. This is where the true nature of Gregory House is finally revealed. Mama here wants to look young forever, and eating lost souls helps her maintain her youth. And after she gets 7 human souls, she can break the barrier, so she's obsessed with eating lost souls to maintain her immortality. That's why our main character is here, so his soul can be harvested. Which still doesn't explain what the heart and the safe thing meant, but who cares, whatever. In the same episode that's explained, Judgment Boy appears again. He gives another hypothetical about Jim asking out a girl but being too scared and convincing himself she has a boyfriend. And like every time he's here, Judgment Boy says he would take the selfish desire and drops the heart. But instead of his normal,
"It was your choice, you get to live with it"
rigmarole, he actually talks to Jim instead of talking at him. Pretty much everything that's happened in Gregory House has been largely out of his control. From eating Hell's Chef's cooking, to Catherine taking his blood, to Roulette Boy's game, everything has been stuff he's just let happen. But now after Judgment Boy's judgment, he gives him a choice. A real choice he gets to make. He presents him with a door and tells him if he can go inside and find his way out of Gregory House, or do the cowardly thing of staying in this field where it's safe. It's the classic selfish desires versus selfless desires. As I was saying earlier, Jim is a coward, and every judgment is a reflection of that. Him running away from his crush, him blaming his friend to avoid punishment, and him not having the goal to see his dying girlfriend. Jim could easily stay here and avoid his problems like he always has, because on the other side of that door is not only the way out, but Gregory waiting for him. And as the first courageous act Jim makes, he goes through the door, finally making his own decisions in life. But this horrifying homestead isn't letting him leave that easily. Hallways full of monitors containing Gregory giving words of discouragement to Jim clutter the place, until eventually he reaches a dead end and a wall gets created behind him. When suddenly a new face pops out to help him. This is Angel Devil Dog, and she's here to help / hinder old Jimbo. She gives him a ladder out of the room he's stuck in, and despite the influence of Gregory, he makes his own path and goes up, leading to a graveyard where a nice zombie fellow saves Jim from Gregory finding him. He offers him a drink, which old Mr. Free Will here denies, and Zombie Man tries to kill him, cool. And unfortunately, this cemetery leads him right back to Gregory House, where despite everything, he's just about ready to give up on escaping this hellish home, when suddenly, Neko Zombie from earlier talks to him through the adjacent room. You see, my previous description of his character was a little dishonest. He's one of the only hotel guests that wants the lost souls to escape, and re-encouraging the main character that he can still get out of here. He tells Jim a bit of advice, that nothing in Gregory House is as it seems, like Angel Devil Dog, who has slight nefarious intentions but appears as an angel. She barges into the room, summoning a doorway that leads to either heaven or hell, and with no other options, as Gregory's starting to walk back, he jumps through, leading him to this pseudo-purgatory space between heaven and hell, where like 5 Judgment Boys come out of nowhere and start berating him with questions, until a golden Judgment Boy appears sporting a new VA speaks, telling Jim that his chances of getting out of here are becoming smaller and smaller, and since he can't go forward and can't go back now, he carves his own path out of here. Nothing is as it seems, and a bridge appears, the gateway that takes him out of Gregory House and back to reality. But not before Gregory can try one last thing, appearing as a spirit chasing down Jim, as literal death makes his only appearance in the entirety of season 1 just to tell Gregory to f**k off. The thing Death cuts off is the thing keeping him trapped here, his negative memories of this place. And now that those have finally been severed, he is free. And as our last episode opens, we don't get our usual intro of the main character monologuing. Instead, flashbacks of real locations inside Jim's house, as his wife talks to him and his kid goes to school. But the thing is shot is we don't see his wife and family. It's instead of the door being open after his son left, dishes piling up in the sink, a meal he doesn't have the drive to eat. He's free, but in a way he's still trapped. And as the sequence plays out, we get flashes of real-life business people walking to work and 3D animated versions. Amazing detail that everything is in black and white except for the 3D models walking by, showing how drab everything appears for Jim in real life. Jim has returned home, yes, but is he really free? He now has the pleasures of returning to his basic 9 to 5 with his family that doesn't care about him. The only thing that seems to have any real life for him anymore is the 3D models representing Gregory House. And with this realization, we get a flash of the first episode again where he was walking through the forest, then the front door of Gregory House, and then finally, he's back. This is the only place where he feels truly free. And all escaping Gregory House did was show him how nothing his life was. And with him returning to Gregory House, season 1 comes to a close and Jim's fate is untold. Overall, I love season 1. I like the characters, the art style, the animation. But the story kind of bugs me. Yeah, I enjoyed the story, obviously, but I don't really like how it ends with the main character losing. Yeah, I get that. This is the best joke I'm going to make in this entire video. The house always wins. But I honestly would have preferred an ending where he gets back to his family and gets a new outlook on life. That, yeah, sometimes things suck, but you're not hopeless. With enough courage, you can always make your way out of a bad situation. But no, I guess the message is, give up, lol. Truthfully, I did like season 1, but that's not why I made this video. Nor why I love the series. No, for that, I have to thank season 2.
How did I end up in a place like this?
As I was saying earlier, this is kind of an anthology, so Jim is pretty much gone. And in his stead, we have a new female protagonist. Unlike Jim, she won't ever get a real name, so it's our job to come up with one ourselves. I'm thinking Kim. This season starts and we're immediately given insight into how Kim got here, opposed to how Jim got nothing. She had just come back from her best friend's wedding and somehow found herself here. And just from the first 3 episodes, we're given a lot to work with. Like the first new character we run into. He's only here for a brief second, but it's an overworked businessman who keeps assuming he's late for work. This is Jim, isn't it? Here's a cool Gregory fact for you. Every character you see in the show was once a human at some point, now have been morphed in these things after their souls become twisted and warped by Gregory House. For example, everybody's favorite Judgment Boy was once a lawyer, who had found himself at the hotel while he was having a debate with himself about what justice and truth really is, concluding that he is the deciding factor. Very similar to Jim from season 1, in the way that both of them came to conclusions that left them trapped forever in this wretched residence. Usually people just get reaped and their soul sucked, but the special few that don't get put on the Sexypedia wiki apparently. So that's the fate of Jim, forever working himself to death. But enough about Jim, over to Kim. When she's given her room, we can tell it's the same one Jim had, by the painting of the cat on the wall indicating it's next to Neko Zombie's room. But this time there's a dead rose in the corner, which Gregory quickly replaces. The rose is meant to be a metaphor about somebody wanting to get close to people, but only hurting the people they touch. Couldn't possibly be indicative of the main character. Like season 1, the first 3 characters we run into are Hell's Chef, Catherine, and Lost Doll. Now it isn't like that to have consistency between the 2 seasons, but instead show the difference between our characters. As Jim was complacent to let everything going on around him happen, Kim is a bit more rebellious. She runs into Hell's Chef after lighting a cigarette, which old Chefy hates. Cigarettes numb taste buds, and since he's a chef, he obviously doesn't want people smoking. The enemy of cuisine, or whatever. Instead of Catherine coming to her room and draining her blood like she did with Jim, she actually breaks into Catherine's room and has a look around before Catherine comes back, in which she hides under the bed, avoiding them. And finally, what happens with Lost Doll is some of the coolest shit ever. Lost Doll is just given to her, posing as a real doll, in which it immediately springs to life trying to kill her. But instead of being complicit like Jim, she lights a cigarette which attracts Hell's Chef and chucks it at her, causing Hell's Chef to destroy the doll. Metal as hell, man. Unlike season 1, where Jim's complicitness made the show more immersive, like we were being guided along with everything that was happening, Kim fighting back and being her own person is an amazing diversion of expectation. She's not going to sit idly by and let Gregory House have its way with her. She's her own person, and I love that. Instead of immersing you with everything like season 1, it instead makes you invested in her character. You want to see her escape. Now with all of these returning characters, that doesn't mean we don't get new ones. There was Hanawa Salaryman, which is only like half a new character, but for a truly new character, we have James. James is Gregory's grandson. Holy shit, he fucks! He's not really on anybody's side and is more of a trickster than anything. Just kind of a little brat that keeps messing stuff up, like getting Catherine's needle jabbed in Gregory. He's just kind of inconveniencing to Gregory and the main character more than anything. This season also strives to tell a more in-your-face story than last season. I really had to dig deep and dissect stuff last time, but this time it's a bit more spelled out. She goes to a bar to drink away her sorrows, where she meets Clockmaster, and Gregory gives her a special time traveler drink that'll make her relive parts of her past. And in this flashback, we're told that the friend's wedding she got back from was actually the wedding for her former boyfriend boyfriend who had just married one of her best friends, and the jealousy from that is what led her to Gregory House, which also explains why she turned to a lot of addictive habits, such as smoking and alcohol. She's trying to drown out her jealousy, which is a theme that will constantly be repeated throughout the entire season. Like when Cactus Gunman shows up and falls in love with the main character but thinks Gregory is her man, and then tries to kill Gregory. Then new character Cactus Girl gets jealous and tries to execute Gregory. This is something I was bound to bring up sooner than later. This show is about story and horror more than anything, but it's also really funny at times. Like Clockmaster being drunk out of his mind. It's not the funniest show in existence, but it has comedy elements which supplement the horror. This sheep in one of the episodes trying to help Kim go to sleep by making her count him, and just keeps crashing into shit. Don't come here if you want comedy, but by all means come here if you want some silly horror. Alright, things have been too positive about this season, let me throw some negatives at the wall. Them being more upfront about the story makes it way easier to follow, but it kind of feels like they're force-feeding you the plot sometimes. Like Judgment Boy appears in this season. He only shows up once, since he's not as relevant as a character this time, but his appearance is really good. I think that also might just be because of how good the line delivery is for this stuff. Like, look.
You're 26 years old.
You have a secure job and a wonderful boyfriend.
Then the day you're promoted, your boyfriend proposes.
Now, what are you gonna do?
Like, that right there is such a fantastic line delivery with this weird factory setting he's in. It makes it so chaotic and creepy. But when you're actually listening to what he's saying, he's just telling you stuff we already know at this point in the season. I guess we now know how old she is. Cool. I mean, I'll take this over cryptic messaging like season 1, but I think they went a little too hard with it, or at least could have used some more stuff that complemented the overall jealousy theme. Like Cactus Gunman showing up did a great job of that. But this is the only part of season 2 so far that does that. Like, by the time Judgment Boy shows up, we've already had Sleep Sheep tell us what's going on, and also that flashback tell us what's going on. Him telling us a third time doesn't really do much narratively. Now, what's the rest of that time spent doing? Well, alongside the jealousy stuff with the main character, Mama has shown up as a real antagonist this time. Unlike last season, where she made a total of 3 appearances, she's a proper threat this time around, usually having Gregory and James do the work for her, but she comes face to face with Kim a few times, and honestly, pretty good villain. So if I had to break up this season into chapters, I would probably say the first half hour is introducing characters and her motives, and the other half hour being about her and her constant escape attempts. She's kind of just meandering around the hotel until midpoint in the season when she overhears Mama and Gregory discussing their soul-sucking plans. From then on, it's about her versus the hotel instead of her just kind of chilling. Gregory and James give her a tracker that summons new character Trap Mouse. This is such a cool design, and I'm really sad it's only here for like 2 seconds in the season. From here on out, it's all escape attempts. For example, unlike Jim, she tries running out the front door. This also gives us an extended look at the exterior of the blasted bed and breakfast. Before, we only got to see the graveyardy parts, but this time we get to see more of the forest, where we get introduced to 2 new characters, Hell's Taxi and Poor Conductor. I don't really think these guys have a purpose, I just think they're here to f with Kim. Hell's Taxi transfers her into the middle of nowhere, and Poor Conductor sends her to a pocket dimension where a needle record almost kills her. Luckily, Gregory saves her life in Hell's Taxi before she's needleized. And we're back to Gregory House. Cool, we made no progress. And from here on in, shit just hits the fan. They send in this definitely not racial stereotype dancer known as Unbaba to sever her soul out of her body, but accidentally get all of their souls removed too. Then Gregory and James almost get eaten by Mama. Gross. Then James runs amok in Gregory's body and she's getting sacrificed, and she put an axe in Gregory's head, and we are 10 minutes from finishing. What does any of this mean? Well, before we finish, I would like to give my interpretation of everything going on in the story. Kim's story has themes of jealousy, fear of commitment, avoiding your problems through addictive outlets, but I think the biggest one of all of them is fear of starting a family. Now, how did I get to this outlandish conclusion? Here is my reasoning. Throughout the entire season, her backstory, unlike Jim's, is shoved down your throat at every avenue. There's a dancer I completely skipped over that gives her a prophecy of wedding with Gregory, showing that she's scared of marrying the wrong person and being stuck with them. Her jealousy over her friend marrying her ex stems from a fear that she missed her chance at marrying somebody she liked, and now fears she'll never get the opportunity ever again. So she's turned to addictive habits to try and forget about her life, becoming a nicotine addict and alcoholic. And shown off by the presence of Lost Doll in the season, as well as the roses from the first couple of episodes that attacks her, she's refusing to let anybody get close to her because anybody who does ends up getting hurt. Now, how can I be sure that has anything to do with her being scared to start a family? Well, I point to none other than one of the main antagonists of the season, a literal family, mainly the new one, James. She's scared that her starting a family will ruin her life and mess up everything like James does repeatedly. He broadcasts their evil plans on TV Fish, He nearly hangs Gregory. She's scared of starting a family, marriage, and by proxy, getting close to people. So she drowns her sorrows in addictive habits. But Gregory House refuses to let her forget. Remember how I mentioned this season really forces down your throat her backstory? That's not really for the audience, that's for her. Where Jim was naturally forgetting everything because he was barely a part of his own life, Kim is desperately trying to forget her own life, but can't because Gregory House won't let her. That in mind is why she's so resilient to everything happening. Unlike Jim, she's refusing to let this place have its way with her, and lashes out every time it tries. She kills Lost Doll, she puts an axe in Gregory after getting resurrected during a sacrifice. She won't let Gregory House win, but unfortunately, like last season, the house always wins. Let's get back to the ending of the story, shall we? While she's sneaking around, she hears a cry of Neko Zombie making his first and last appearance for the season. This time he's been chained up against the wall so he can't get out. And for the first time, she shows sympathy to one of the people within the hotel. She takes off his binding and even gives him a cloth for the wound around it. She does this because he's the first character in the hotel she actually empathizes with. Neko Zombie says it best himself. The scene here is genuinely so beautiful, I just need to play it. Hey, welcome to me editing at 7 in the morning. So, that clip I was going to play that I just said looks super cool. I can't because apparently the classical music that they play in that clip is copyright claimed. Alright, sure, whatever, man. Okay. This is genuinely one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in a show, let alone an obscure CG Japanese anime released in the year 2000, only localized airing in Canada. The music and the sounds are just so harrowing, I love it. With that, Neko Zombie burned down everything to the ground, where we're treated to several clips of different characters burning, such as Lost Doll flying around on fire, or Hell's Chef melting because he's a candle. All of this nightmare can finally end if she steps into the flames, finally destroying Gregory House. But she doesn't. You see, there's a bigger overall message at play for the whole season. She's scared of marrying the wrong person, starting a family and thinking it'll ruin everything, making new friends. She is scared of commitment. She cannot commit to a relationship intimately or friendly. She cannot commit to starting a family. She cannot commit to marriage. And she cannot commit to stepping into the flames. So she doesn't do anything, and the final episode opens on the entirety of Gregory House being destroyed. The only survivors being Kim, Mama, and of course, Gregory. What burned down wasn't Gregory House, but her own reality. And now that it's gone, there's no hope for her ever escaping. And she earns the worst fate for her storyline. She becomes adopted into the family. Her greatest fear is now realized. The entire house reconstructs itself and everything starts anew. We even get to see her shadow in the epilogue, proving everything I just said. She is a mouse like the rest of them now. She has become her greatest fear. And that's the end of the season. And I definitely enjoyed it way more than season 1. Yes, it has its own problems, and I'll get to that in a minute, but there's so much praise I would like to give it first. The main character feels so much more alive. The story is a lot easier to follow. There's a clear antagonist and end goal for both parties. And I might just be going insane, but I think the animation improved a lot between seasons. Like, this shot of all of them flying as spirits looked really good. It's insane this came out in the year 2000 for me. I could easily see this coming out today and not batting an eye. Hell, somebody made SFM models of all the characters, so you can continue the series. Before I continue with the things I liked, let's get complaints out of the way. I don't like a lot of the new characters they introduced, I'll say it. A lot of them are one-offs and barely memorable. Unbaba felt very strange and slightly racist. I don't even remember the name of that one dancer that showed up in the wedding sequence. Cactus Girl is there, I suppose. Trap Mouse was a really awesome design that was on screen for a total of 5 seconds. Hell's Taxi is another one that's just kind of there. I really liked Poor Conductor, I thought his design and gimmick was really good. But none of them had the staying power or relativeness to the main character that season 1 had. Like, Judgment Boy really doesn't serve a purpose at all in this season. Yeah, I liked when he showed up, but he might as well just be throwing peanuts at me like a zoo animal, but replace the peanuts with Judgment Boy. He just says stuff we already know about the main character, so he achieves nothing with his appearance. Catherine makes a reappearance and likewise does very little. There's nothing wrong with an out with the old and with the new mentality for a show that's segmented like this, but it would have been nice if the new was as good as the old. Because, let's be real here, James does not have the same impact as Judgment Boy.
Some coffee or some tea? Which one's it going to be? Your wife or your mother-in-law? Whose side do you take? If you had to choose, would you steal food or money? If both mom and dad are drowning, which one will you save?
Do you know who I am? Judgment.
What are you doing, James?
I'm the camera guy.
That's the camera used for broadcasting on TV Fish. That's not a toy.
No way. Don't you mess with my freedom of speech, Grandpa.
It's not the same oomph, you know? And before you really dissect the plot of what's going on, it's pretty repetitive with how much they're going over the same events of our life. But aside from those little issues, this is the best season in my opinion. There's not as much to speculate on as there was with season 1, but that's not entirely a bad thing. I kind of view the first 2 seasons as a package deal. Season 1 is better in the way that every character relates to Jim somehow, and we get to see more meaningful interactions with all of them. But season 2 is better in the way that the main antagonist is stronger alongside an easier to understand story. I think I still prefer season 2 over season 1, but don't take that as me saying season 1 is bad. Far from it, I just like season 2 more. The first 2 seasons of Gregory Horror Show is some of my favorite horror out there. Yeah, it's not really scary, I would just say it's unnerving at best, but it's not really about that. But I don't really care about that stuff, because I can confidently say that the first 2 seasons of Gregory Horror Show are some of my favorite pieces of horror ever made. The first 2 seasons. Gregory Horror Show in a lot of ways, to me personally, is relatable. A lot of times I feel like I don't make my own decisions and I'm scared of commitment. But I think the strongest way it relates to me is that it's going through a fucking identity crisis. As I was saying earlier, the first 2 seasons were horrors with comedy elements. But around when season 3 started, it began to shift towards a comedy with horror elements. How does this affect the show? Let me show you just what I mean. Gregory Horror Show The Last Train stars Gregory as our main character this time around, and he's on a train going somewhere. And quick side note, I'm going to be doing more of an overview about this season because, to make a long story short, I think Gregory Horror Show The Last Train is extremely okay. Like, it's just fine. The plot of the season is Gregory using a bunch of souls converted into pure energy to run a train to escape Gregory House. While he's on his way, he keeps getting reminders of Gregory House and, by extension, his mother. Sleepy Sheep recounting a dream he had about her, Payphone deadass just calling her, him getting visions of her, all slowly chipping away at the psyche of Gregory, until eventually the souls powering the train regains sentience and the whole thing gets lost in the void somehow, on its way to the Lost World. Further specifying they never elaborate what this Lost World is, where he gazes into a giant version of the Mirror Man and ends up back in Gregory House. Cool. That is a brief rundown of the plot of the season. So, let me complain about it. For starters, I don't care. Yeah, I like Gregory, he's a good character and all, but not strong enough to be the main character. A lot of the charm the show used to have is now missing because he's the main character. Because before it felt like we, the audience, were the protagonist, and that's because of the first-person perspective. Experiencing everything through the main character's POV did so much in ways of making it not only scary, but interesting to watch. When something attacked Jim or Kim, it felt like they were attacking us too. But now that it's Gregory as the main character, it's lacking a lot of what the first 2 seasons had. But to counter that argument, you might say that this season is supposed to be more of a comedy with horror elements like I was saying earlier, and you would kind of have a point with that. This season is undeniably funnier than the last 2. Like, there's this one moment that actually made me laugh where the conductor is giving warnings about what's coming up, and one of them is warped through space in time. Or this big chicken who thinks he's getting his dream job, but really they're just gonna deep fry him. If the direction was to make it funnier, then they succeeded. But the problem is, I don't like that direction. I like Gregory Horror Show as a, horror show. I liked when we had to sort through the personal problems and traumas of the season's protagonists. Yeah, Gregory does have issues he needs fixing. Like I said previously, the whole arc of him trying to escape Gregory House and his mother. But I'm simply not as invested in Gregory as it was Kim or even Hanawa. Hey, speaking of Hanawa, he makes an appearance here as one of the first returning characters Gregory bumps into. Same rigmarole as last time we saw him, he's still depressed and stuff, sad. That neatly leads me to one of the things this season does really well. I like a lot of the returning characters even if they don't have a voiceless husk of a main character to bounce off anymore. Pretty much everybody's here. Judgment Boy, Catherine, Lost Doll, Bonsai Kabuki, Poor Conductor, Hell's Chef, everybody's favorites. It also takes the opportunity to flesh out previous characters who barely had any screen time. Like the previously mentioned Hanawa gets some actual voice lines. We get a better look at Trap Mouse from season 2 and learn that there are 2 of them. Those zombies from the graveyard back in season 1 get some character. Roulette Boy, also from season 1, was really fun to see return. I like the lengths it goes to expand on the previous one-off characters. And I'm pretty sure sure it adds the most new characters out of any season. Bonehead is an archaeologist who dies after being seen once, cool. There's this little dude who sells radioactive peanuts. There's this pig who dies after one episode, awesome. That aforementioned chicken that gets deep fried. You might have noticed that they keep killing all of the new characters they introduce, but that's not really a problem considering what the next season is. More on that when we get to it. Really, everybody is here except for a few standouts nobody really cared about. Like Umbaba, the Safe, and Bird Guy from season 1. Toilet Baby, I guess? Or those cultists who tried sacrificing Kim? And wait a second, where the hell is Kim? It's not like the other members of Gregory's family aren't here. James shows up. Kim joining their family was a huge moment for the franchise. And you mean to tell me she's not here? I mean, Mama only shows up through visions and over the phone, but it would have been nice to see her for at least an episode. Hanawa comes back several times, why not her? That leads me into a problem I have with the season. The story kinda sucks. Every season of Gregory Horror Show so far has an overarching theme. Season 1 was about freedom and toxic work culture. Season 2 is about commitment and the fear of starting a family, and Season 3 is about ambition and second thing. The other things you kind of have to dissect the plots for, but
I am none other than ambition itself.
Don't worry, it's pretty easy to pick up on. And they lay on the theme pretty dang heavy. Fat Chicken, yes that's his real name, is a character I've brought up once or twice now. He's convinced he's going to get his dream job where he doesn't have to do anything and just has to eat. So yeah, they're deep frying him. He exhibits blind ambition, bobbity boo. Bonehead is an archaeologist obsessed with finding a rainbow dragon, and his dead wife who died helping him look for it tells him it's in a cave up ahead, which then collapses killing him. Blind ambition, wowzers. These ghosts of warriors wanting to follow literally anybody because they think they're their lord. I'm pretty sure has something to do with ambition. They lay it on pretty dang thick. And I'm going to be honest here, the theme being shoved in your face this much makes it way less fun to watch the show. It was so much fun looking at everything and deciphering what everything meant. Like the show was a broken frame, you had to piece everything together and to show the full picture. James being in season 2 feels like a whatever, throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of inclusion, but when you really dissect all of the themes and look at it after finishing the season, it makes a lot more sense. Or Judgment Boy from season 1 being a metaphor about making choices, which is a giant task for Jim. Once you put all of the puzzle pieces together, everything makes sense. But I just don't feel like The Last Train has that same level of detective work you have to do. When stuff is this plainly set out to you, it makes you feel like you're getting spoon-fed the theming, like what I'm doing. I think a part of that puzzle problem is that there's really no mystery going on throughout the whole season. From the very first episode of season 1 and 2, you're hit with an immediate question in the opening dialogue. What are they doing in this forest? What path did each character go down in order to land themselves in Gregory House? Feeling trapped in an endlessly looping job, jealousy from your friend marrying. Then when you do figure those things out, or the show tells you eventually, it's then up to you to figure out how everything correlates to that theme. Clockmaster trying to send Jim back to before he entered Gregory House but failing is the point about how even when he tries to escape his life, he can't. Or James representing Kim's fear of having a family. Everything in the show feels like it works off itself in one way or another, but I just don't feel that from season 3. Like a lot of characters just have the same message about them. Blind ambition, blind ambition, blind ambition, all of them have the same character trait. And I think in a way, all of that ties into Gregory. Gregory is not a good protagonist. He's good as a sniveling old man explaining things to the main character, but carrying out a plot solo is not in his wheelhouse. Yeah, I like a lot of his interactions with other characters, but unlike the last two main characters, there is nothing to dissect with him. We already know his story. His character has already been explained. What's the point of following him through any of this? The simplest answer in my mind is that there isn't one. I'm sorry, I like The Last Train, but it's not anywhere close to the quality of the last two seasons. I liked the jokes, atmosphere of the train, new characters, returning characters, but that's really it. It's hard to feel invested when there's nothing to invest in. But as I briefly mentioned earlier, there's one more season we should go over. And now that we're back at Gregory House, it should pick up from here, logically. Hey, quick editor's note, it does not pick up from here. Gregory Horror Show, the bloody card. Gregory Horror Show, the bloody cart, at least I think that's how this is pronounced. A lot of my viewers are audio listeners, so it's K-A-R-T-E. I'm just gonna say cart because, frankly, this season does not deserve the brainpower. What f***ing footnotes of a season this was. This season stars Catherine as our main character, because why the hell not at this point, as she manages a hospital with a new character, Dr. Fritz. I don't have the energy for transitioning topics this time, so I'm just gonna lay out how we're talking about this season like this. Story, themes, characters, how much of this season I was playing Cuphead during, and humor. And in that order, Gregory Horror Show Season 4 was bad, non-existent, bad and non-existent, a lot, and actually pretty good. That's the only props I'm giving this season. It was pretty funny, I guess. Like this part where they off Judgment Boy Gold for no reason was pretty funny. Or this clip, which is way too funny for me not to play.
Which am I, a nurse or a woman? And which is more important, love or my career? Oh, look, a shooting star. Tell me, shooting star, which should I choose?
Credit where credit is due. I would say this is on par, if not above, the last season in terms of comedy. In terms of everything else, it falls flat on its face and dies. For starters, there's like no story at all. I guess she manages to balance her regular life and job life in the end, but that is the most generic plot for a female lead I've ever heard. There is no metaphors with other characters tying into the main character at all. In the end, she just fucking kills every other person in the show. I keep dying on the stupid secret fight in the Cuphead DLC, and who cares if it's funny? I'm not engaged in the slightest. This season is such a fucking mess, I don't even know how I'm supposed to start with this. And in fact, I'm not even going to start because there is not a single positive thing in the entire season even worth discussion. The most noteworthy thing about this show is its existence at all. A show that started out as a first-person horror series, with its main gimmick being the first-person perspective and deep unraveling plot threads, only to end up like this. Why Catherine of all people? I'm happy you asked, because Gregory Horror Show wasn't doing too hot around this time. This is all just guesswork, but I could imagine to try and regain interest in the show, they would use Gregory Horror Show's most popular character as the main protagonist. Show ended right after this. Yeah, this was the final season of Gregory Horror Show, and what a wet fart to end on. That is technically all 4 seasons of Gregory Horror Show. What are my thoughts overall? Huge mixed bag. Really liked season 1, loved season 2, felt season 3 was pretty alright, and season 4 just stunk. But don't think me complaining about a lot of this means I don't like it. I love this stupid little series, it's so damn charming. At least the first 2 seasons are really good. The writing is excellent, the atmosphere just feels so right. The music is surprisingly good at times. The animation is disturbing in all of the right ways. I just love this show, and I'm honestly kind of sad it ended how it did. But that's not technically the end. Well, yes it was, but there are some DVD bonuses we can look at. My Uncle Jimmy just died, but we can talk about his cat. The Gregory Horror Show Gallery Tour released with Season 1 DVDs, and stars an unnamed guest alongside Gregory going over portraits of every character in Season 1. These are fun, I guess, nothing real of note. Shout out to Media Monster for making me watching these pretty whatever DVD extras possible. Yeah, these are only in Japanese, they never got dubbed like the rest of the show. I guess Canada was too busy for this one. Okay, that is the last of it. That is the last of Gregory Horror Show, and also where my initial watch of the series ended. And I am just so happy this show exists. It's just so out there and different and unique and zany and another unique synonym I can't think of. But the series didn't really end here. The show did, but the Gregory Horror Show didn't. So, what on earth does that sentence mean? What it means is that the show was pretty dang popular, actually. Enough to warrant several spin-offs. Board game, video games, merchandise, mobile phone games, a f***ing lighter. All of this is not only why the video is so long, but why my bank account is dry as a bone. If we factor in the cost of the board game, the video game, a region-free PS2, something I'll talk about way later, and this thumbnail, we are around $900 right now. So there's this cool red button you can hit. I say we start off this spin-off discussion by talking about the one you all probably know best. The PS2 spin-off game Gregory Horror Show Soul Collector. Soul Collector was released in 2002 for the PS2, and it was made by f***ing Capcom of all people. Like, I know it's a horror franchise, and they did a lot of those around then, but were they really chomping at the bit to make a video game out of an obscure 3D animated anime only airing in Japan and select stations in Europe? Yes. Enough fooling around, let's start. Alright, off the bat, it's pretty much the same setup as the first 2 seasons, except you're playing as the main character this time. You're not given any explanation for why you're here, so you just kind of show up. So go ahead and make your own backstory. My character is here because Jumpstart Quest for the Color Miser is unplayable now because the servers were shut down, and I'll never get to relive my childhood of playing that game. That has nothing to do with anything, that's just been waning on me for a while. You show up, you get a room, you name yourself, you pick if you're a boy or girl, this was the hardest part of the game for me, and you catch some Z's. While asleep, Death from Season 1 and a little bit of Season 2 shows up. I love this guy, he's a reference to my favorite thing, 1957's The Seventh Seal. That's why he's got a Swedish flag on his head, by the way. I just wanted to say that for the 3 people who even questioned that. He gives you a proposition. There are lost souls being held by different hotel guests, and if you can get all 12 back for him, he'll get you out of this fix. It's a very basic plot setup, but this game isn't really about the plot, so who cares? It's about, holy shit, this was made by Capcom. This is the most game that was made by Capcom in the 2000s Capcom camera angle I've ever seen. Yeah, if you couldn't already tell, this was kind kind of inspired by Resident Evil, which shines through with a bunch of stuff I'll get to in a minute. But for right now, we hear some screaming from the other room. We get to see Neko Zombie. He's the star of the tutorial of the game, further elaborating off of stuff Death already told us, like there's 12 souls and a bunch of other guests in the hotel have them. And since Neko Zombie just wants us to get out of here, he gives us his soul for free. But not for free. He teaches you about different mechanics you need first, such as peeking and knocking. These are two abilities that are essential throughout the game. Knocking will let you knock on doors, tell you descriptions of different objects, and sometimes get items from dressers and stuff. Knocking on somebody's door can coax them to come out, which isn't exactly the most useful thing in the world, but I still use it here and there. Peeking, however, is damn near essential. Hitting triangle will let you go into a first-person mode, which is useful for seeing stuff the overhead camera can't see, like certain items, but you can also use it to look through keyholes with this ability, letting you look at whatever is going on the other side of a door. So tracking guest behaviors, seeing what they're saying to themselves, getting hints for puzzles, all can be revealed this way. Triangle also lets you hide behind certain pieces of furniture, which is useful for when you want to be trapped in the lounge for about 5 minutes as Catherine doesn't make up her damn mind if she wants to leave or not. Neko Zombie makes you test out peeking by asking what his favorite food is and then muttering to himself hints about what it is through the door. It's a really dang clever system and makes the puzzles feel super rewarding at times. Neko Zombie gives you his soul, you sleep so you can give it to Death, and you're already 1 out of 12 done. The first 2 souls you get are kinda just tutorials, so you only really need to get 10. Because this next one is kinda spelled out for you how to get it. Catherine is our next target, and to make things harder, she'll run in the opposite direction from wherever you are. After you exit Neko Zombie's room, James will run by and throw a banana peel on the ground with Gregory chasing him, saying somebody could slip. Yeah, we already know where this one's going. You don't get the banana peel from the ground though, it's your responsibility to scour the entire hotel to go find one yourself. Exploring and curiosity is your greatest strength in this game. You could run around aimlessly until you find where you need to go, or you could talk to Gregory wandering the halls in which he'll give you a map. That'll give you a pretty good hint on where to go. There's a dining room which is attached to a kitchen that has a perfectly good banana peel in the trash. Throw it at Catherine and she goes down and you get your soul. Now just because you get a soul doesn't mean you should immediately give it to Death. If you hold on to one for a while, it'll make your mental gauge deplete slower. Wow, what's that? The mental gauge is this little thing in the top left around your character that will deplete over time, and various things can deplete the mental gauge. Finding items such as herbs and energy drinks will make the mental gauge replenish, while having a status condition or running into a guest will make it go down. Why is that? Well, some guests aren't that happy that you took their prized soul and are now kind of pissed at you. So the next time they see you, they'll try to chase you down and force you into a horror show, drastically lowering your mental gauge and leaving you lying there for a while. Why does that second part matter at all? Well, there is an in-game time mechanic similar to Pikmin. Every guest has their own schedule and routine they perform day in and day out. So Catherine will go watch TV in the lounge for about 2 hours, and Gregory will make rounds of the hotel. So while they're doing a bunch of random junk, you can take advantage and go places previously restricted. If you try to enter Catherine's room while she's in there, you'll have to close your door again in fear of people overhearing what the hell is going on inside your room. Or if you try to go behind the desk in the foyer while Gregory is there, he'll stop you. So combining a constantly depleting sanity meter, roaming threats that all have their own schedules, and function independently from one another, objectives you can complete in any order, and a massive hotel you can explore, this game f***ing rules. Genuinely, this is one of the coolest and most in-depth horror games I've ever played, and I'm so sad it's not more popular. Capcom really poured their heart and soul into a video game called Gregory Goddamn Horror Show. I'll give more thoughts in a minute, but for right now we need to go get Judgment Boy's soul as our next objective. And it also segues into my first complaint. This game is pretty damn cryptic at times, which is also a complaint I had about Enter the Gungeon and Terraria, and I'm kinda starting to wonder if I'm an idiot. Alright, let me justify this one by explaining how you get Judgment Boy's soul. Judgment Boy will be wandering the halls and tell you if you want to be judged, you must bring him an item that symbolizes your problem. And this is where I got stuck because that could literally mean anything in this game. So for about half an hour, I wandered around completely aimlessly without a single hint of what to do. I tried peeking on and talking to different guests, trying to get a hint or at least something to point me in the right direction, but I got nothing. This is about when I decided to turn to Google for a hint instead. Specifying I didn't look up the answer, I just wanted to know the item I needed. Also, this is one of 2 times I did this in the entire playthrough. I just wanted to get that out of the way. And I needed to get a self-help book, apparently. Well, there was a library, so I went looking in there, which I couldn't find it. I don't remember who said it, but one of the characters said Gregory had been depressed recently. So I went to the storeroom where he reads, and even in his private room, and still no self-help book. What you have to do is go into Catherine's room, grab a dirty magazine that belongs to Gregory, show it to him, which he'll freak out and demand it back, and then he'll give you a self-help book to make you not be a gooner or something. This is incredibly nonsensical and disconnected, but I can't lie and say it didn't feel really damn good getting the realization that Catherine's room room could probably contain one of the puzzle pieces. Then after I got the dirty magazine, it specified it shouldn't be shown to kids, so I immediately showed it to a kid, and James said it was his grandpa's, in which I showed it to Gregory. Yeah, that was cool, but if I hadn't cheated and already knew what to look for, I probably wouldn't have gotten there as fast. Or at all, honestly. Only some of the souls are this long-winded though, don't worry, a lot of them are perfectly fine. It's just some puzzles here and there are far too cryptic for their own good. There's a way worse example later, but let me save that for then. For right now though, we show the book to Judgment Boy and he forks over the soul after a judgment. Why don't I talk about what the judgment is? Well, it's because I was covering my ears during this cutscene because they wouldn't stop bleeding.
Do you know my name? Judgment!
Okay, I'm sorry to whoever voices Judgment Boy in this game for what I'm about to say, but it sucks. Yeah, a lot of the voice actors for the show didn't reprise their role for the game. People like Gregory's voice actor and Catherine's came back, but Judgment Boy, Mummy Papa, Mummy Dog, James, as well as others didn't come back. Which is fine, a lot of the new actors do a pretty good job. Like, James sounds well enough, but I cannot get over how much they butchered Judgment Boy here. He doesn't have the same impact as the show version of him.
Alrighty then, let's ask the scales of truth!
Is that so? Well, I say we should consult the balance of truth.
After collecting Judgment Boy's soul, you're forced to go to sleep because there's nothing else you can do, which night 1 will end and night 2 begins. This is where the game really starts. You're no longer forced into an order of whose soul you get. Lost Doll, Mummy Papa and his son, and Cactus Gunman and Cactus Girl all show up. This is where the game really opens up and you can go anywhere. There's a second floor you can go to now, as well as an outside area. And it's now up to you to figure out how to do everything from here. I love this. You're so free to just do whatever in this game. It's so brilliant in a way that catches me so off guard for a PS2 game. Let alone a PS2 game that only released in specific countries based off a show not a lot of people have heard of. It's like they didn't want you to experience this stuff. I'm pretty sure all this was made by the Zodiac Killer. But you're not completely free, however. You're still held back by not only the mental gauge, but status conditions. After a while of staying up without sleep, you'll eventually get tired, and tiredness leads to oodles of problems. First, a headache. It won't really do anything, but after 30 in-game minutes, it'll develop into nervousness, which makes items only half as effective. Nervousness can also be gotten if you experience a horror show, so keep that in mind. But after 15 minutes of nervousness, you'll become confused, making your controls inverted. Factoring in the camera already not helping, this makes things damn near impossible to maneuver. And fortunately, that's the worst it gets for ones developed naturally. There are still 2 more specialty ones though. Melancholy, only gotten after you lose a soul after witnessing a horror show, and darkness, which automatically happens between 12 AM and 6 AM. And it'll make everything basically unplayable. Joy. Now there's a few ways you can fix these conditions. You can give a soul to death, which will automatically cure any ailment, or get medicine from the Gregory Horror Shop. This is the only location in the hotel you can buy sedatives from a smiley gray rat, but also sells useful items for your journey, like potions that will recover huge amounts of your mental gauge, cures for status ailments like headache medication. They sell books that also raise the mental gauge, as well as a ton of random stuff, like bananas in case you accidentally found a way to waste one that was required for Catherine, or key items that are necessary for people's souls, like the doll for guess who. But here's my favorite part about the Gregory shop. Outside of the music, which for some ungodly reason is absolute flames, my favorite part of the shop is the currency system. You can buy things in this game, but there's no money. So how do you buy things? Well, you can find random items and doodads scattered throughout the entire hotel. Food, random medications, stuff like that. Well, all of them have a certain rarity to them. Most herbs only have a 1-star rarity, but most medications have a 2. Where these rarities matter is anytime you want to buy something, you have to exchange items that build up to the same amount of stars. So let's say you want an energy drink that'll cost 3. You'll have to trade up to that number, whether it be 1 herb and a headache medication, or 3 herbs, 3 random food items, really anything. It's such a good system because anytime you need something, you have to debate with yourself what don't you need right now. You also have to factor in your limited inventory space. It is perfectly small. Off the cuff, I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure it's 8 slots, correct me if I'm wrong. You can only carry so many items, and books take up space as well, so it becomes a strategy of staying out and about to hope to get more things done sooner, or stopping by your room so you can drop off books and store items in your dresser that you don't need at the moment. This is one of the best inventory and shop systems I've seen in a video game, and it's coming out of a dusty relic nobody's ever heard of from 21 years ago. Well, that's enough jibber jabber, let's head back to collecting souls. As I said before, you can get these next 3 in any order. Mummy Dog and Cactus Gunman will run away from you, while Lost Doll will attack you directly if you try to take her soul. I'm pretty mixed on these three as a whole. Mummy Dogs is pretty good because there's several ways you can do it. You can only get it when he's asleep, so you can either wait for him to collapse from running while chasing him, or wait until it's nighttime when they're asleep and you can sneak in there and steal it. It's not complex at all, and it honestly didn't feel super rewarding getting it because I just kind of ran in there and ran out. But Cactus Gunman's was a lot better. He's incredibly paranoid because he thinks there are people coming after him since he's on the run. So how you have to get him is by constantly knocking on his door, then hiding to scare him shitless, making him drop his soul and running away. I solved this one by accident when I was messing around trying to think of how I can get it. And shout out to Cactus Girl's room for being one of the funniest bits in the game. Instead of one of the basic rooms everybody has, it's an entire f***ing desert. I don't know how that works, but it's really funny. She kind of has a similar purpose to Neko Zombie. She'll chill in there most of the time and give you tips, but if you catch her outside of her room, she'll attack you, so I guess she's bipolar. And finally, Lost Doll, who requires you to buy a 5-star doll from the shop and give it to her. After receiving it, she'll stop guarding her room and let you grab it. A lot simpler than whatever the hell I was doing with Judgment Boy, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. One of my favorite things with this game is how it becomes naturally more difficult as things go on. The more souls you collect, the more people will try to kill you in the hotel. Obviously not everybody like Neko Zombie, Judgment Boy, and Gregory. They're just kind of neutrals. Not really trying to do much in the way of aiding you or stopping you, but pretty much everybody else tries to kill you at the closest opportunity. My favorite one though has got to be James. He isn't trying to get any souls from you, but instead will chase you around making noise, not only alerting guests to your location if they're close enough, but he'll also get mad if you try peeping through keyholes. So if you have James following you around, you can't peep. It's such a genius use of his character, and I wish more guests were like this. This is going to sound so random and out of pocket, but this really reminds me of Baldi's Basics. If you are unaware, Baldi is really the only thing in the game that can end your run, but there are random encounters that can happen that don't really help, like this one girl who forces you to jump rope. I kind of wish Gregory Horror Show Soul Collector was more similar to Baldi's Basics in that regard. That is the only time I'm ever saying anything that's close to that. Like, could you imagine if Judgment Boy, instead of just wandering the hallways aimlessly, would force you into a judgment if he encountered you, not only making noise, but stalling you temporarily, which would have paired greatly with the randomly wandering guests. What we have now is still great, don't get me wrong. One of my favorite moments from this whole thing was something that was completely random. I accidentally ran into Cactus Girl and ran away from her trying to find somewhere to hide, and accidentally ran into Catherine in the hallway while running, and nearly died. It was awesome. Dynamic, non-scripted events like this in open-ended games is one of my favorite things that can occur. If you ever play this game, which I would highly recommend you do, something like this might not even happen to you at any point, which is just so goddamn cool. Anyway, we grab the 3 souls, hand them over to Death, watch more recycled footage from the show in lieu of actual cutscenes, and we get new guests. TV Fish, Roulette Boy, and Hell's Chef all join the party. I am shocked it took this long for Hell's Chef to be added. On top of that, we can now explore the expansive underground of Gregory House. Night 1 was the ground floor, Night 2 is the first floor, so Night 3 is the French catacombs, which also contains by far my favorite soul yet. You see, down here there's a bunch of random junk you can find, and sub-level 3 in one of the corridors has a dice block, and every basement sub-level has a dead end dedicated to one thing in particular, and that's Roulette Boy. You would not believe the look on my face when I found out they translated his entire gimmick from the show into this game. If you go up and talk to him while you have the die equipped, he'll let you play Hell's Roulette. Do you remember that one video where that guy made a board game specifically devised to torture people? Yeah, well this shit did it 2 decades earlier. You and Gregory are both dropped into the middle of a board game and have to race each other to the end. Whoever gets there first is the victor. And along with that, you have to do a bunch of random shit in order to survive. Your mental gauge is the key here. Everything tries to lower it. There are bombs that will blow you up, giant 10-ton weights that'll get dropped in your head. This game is so sadistic, it's scattered with return to start spaces. Luckily, there are items you can get that'll raise your mental gauge back up, as well as items that'll mess with the other player, like one that can steal one of their items or remove it entirely. This should technically be the worst soul because it's entirely random, but god damn it, it's funny. They built an entire board game specifically made to torture the player into a PS2 horror game. How can you not love that? The most random and obscene shit can just happen and you're forced to roll with the punches. I was right near the end and about to win when the game decided to send me back to the start because God isn't real. The only reason I won in the end was because Gregory was 1 space away from victory and I threw a card at him that would make him move backwards, in which he landed on a bomb and then a giant weight fell on him and he died, instantly making me the only surviving player. How have more people not played this video game? This might be the best thing mankind has ever ever made. I could spend more time than necessary going over all of the items or talking about every space, but why should I? It makes it more fun if I don't and you just experience it yourself. There's a reason Roulette Boy was in that thumbnail. This shit rocked. But after you win, he rewards you with a soul and you can move on. But if you ever want to play Hell's Roulette again, you can do it from the title screen or just return to this part of the basement. Stuff like this just reminds me of those random shenanigans that happen in modern day indie games. But must I reiterate, it came out 21 years ago. This game was so ahead of its time, and I'm just gonna say it has aged phenomenally in most regards. Yeah, the puzzles are a little cryptic at times. Like, I don't know how anybody who isn't on the spectrum would figure out Cactus Gunman's thing. But shit, I think a lot of this stuff holds up tremendously. Especially these visuals, because oh my god, the visuals. I mentioned how the show looks good, well this looks even better. It would probably look a lot better on a real CRT, but even on a device I'm using to capture PS2 footage, it still looks really good. Unlike a lot of games at the time where they were trying to look super modern and ahead of their time. Like Resident Evil or Shadow of the Colossus, it retains that papercraft art style from the show. Sure, my character looks funny as hell when they walk around, but that's a small price to pay. It reminds me a lot of Wind Waker in that regard. Both games came out within the same generation of consoles, and both still hold up really well because of their art styles. Their cartooniness is what preserves them in their own little ways, and I love that. Seriously, what the f are you waiting for? Play the game. Right, sorry, back to the objective. And we have TV Fish and Hell's Chef left to go. I felt so smart for these two, dude. Starting off, TV Fish. Back when I was taking care of Lost Doll, I noticed they were selling batteries at the Gregory shop, but they were sold out. So I logged that in the back of my mind, figuring they would be useful later. So you know my face lit up when I found a remote downstairs in the basement that had missing batteries? TV Fish is definitely the most passive guest in the hotel. They don't try and attack you, they don't really try and talk. Even after you get their soul, they still run away in fear. How you make them stop and grab the souls, you have to get the batteries, put them in the remote, find one of the rare times they're actually in the basement not doing a who knows what, and finally blast them with it, causing them to keel over. So you can grab the soul. Not the most complex puzzle in the world, but it still felt really rewarding to do. And then lastly, Hell's Chef, and this one actually rewards you for your knowledge of the show. Hell's Chef spends most of his time in the kitchen making meals, but when he's away, you can sneak in there and mess with the food. I'm not sure anything specific would do different things, but I just put a bunch of random shit in the pot, like apple juice, a banana, an old can I was carrying for some reason, until the whole thing turned black and was overflowing, so I ran away. Which leads to one of the coolest segments in the game. Hell's Chef immediately assumes it was you who did it and starts running around the first floor of the hotel frantically looking for you. He's faster than you. If he catches you, you're dead. This is so cool. This entire segment relies on you trying to figure out how to deal with him in the fastest way possible before he can get to you. I had absolutely no idea how to defeat this dude, so it just led to me running into the storeroom and hiding. And I got to thinking, how do they defeat him in the show? Well, they extinguish him, so it's probably something along those lines. He can only run around the first floor, so it's probably something there. And the shop closes during this sequence, so it's probably not related to an item like Catherine a Lost Doll. And then it clicked. As I was standing in the storeroom, I realized there was a breeze coming through the window. So I waited for him to find me, nearly got caught in the process, ran into the storeroom, and a cutscene activated. I popped right the f off. This is one of the most rewarding puzzles in the game. I'm just gonna say it. It challenges your deduction of possible avenues for subduing him, forcing you to narrow down your options into what is available around you. Genuinely one of the cool scripted parts of the game. I don't think anything's ever gonna come as close as their closest imitation of Super Mario Party, but damn it, that was cool. Before moving on to the next batch of souls, I want to talk about some more random stuff. One thing I really liked about this game is the random events that can just occur. Like when I was trying to mess with the pot, I found Neko Zombie in the kitchen rummaging through the fridge before Gregory came in there and brought him back to his room. That added nothing, but was just a really cool added detail. Or way earlier in the game when you're trying to get in Neko Zombie's room, if you use the key right in front of Gregory, he'll tell you to f right off. It's great. This game just has so many little attentions to detail and love poured into it. It is clear that the people making this game not only paid attention to, but loved the source material. I wouldn't have figured out how to beat Hell's Chef if I hadn't already watched the show and put 2 and 2 together. This whole entire game feels like a love letter to fans of the franchise. Enough jabbering though, we head back to our room, give the souls to death, a new guest moves in. Night 4, this time we get Clockmaster and his son, Angel Devil Dog, and... good lord, they're invisible. No third person for this night, but there's 3 souls left. So I'm guessing they're saving it for somebody big, and since the transition cutscenes between nights is Mama chastising Gregory for letting us get all of the souls, I'm gonna take a wild guess and say it's her. Alright, let's talk about Clockmaster first, because this one's the dumbest puzzle in the game, and I kinda love it because of that. So Clocky doesn't actually have the soul. That would be my son, which, side note, is by far the dumbest name for our character's child. This is on the same level of Timmy's parents being called Mom and Dad. Anyway, my son is actually carrying the soul, and isn't really aggressive towards you at first. If you keep prying though, he'll summon in his dad and force you to watch a horror show, which comically just involves him flopping over and dying, so you don't actually lose any mental gauge. So how are you supposed to get the soul from the clocks then? Well, instead of immediately barging into the storeroom where my son is, I decided to peek through to see what he was saying first and hear his monologue. Apparently the screwdriver he's using to fix a clock is a gift from his dad they both treasure greatly. So after they both gave me a horror show and wandered off, I grabbed the screwdriver from the box and... now what? Well, pretty much everybody in the hotel talks about how much of an oaf old Clockmaster is, and his special ability wearing him out. Well, I remember from the show that in Season 1, Clockmaster uses his time manipulation ability to go back to the start of the season and then passes out. So I hatched a plan. I waited for him to fall asleep in the middle of the night in the bar where I knew nobody else in the hotel could get in my way, went in, woke him up, showed him the screwdriver, which led to him getting pissed and chasing me, and unlike most guests where they just normally chase you through the hotel, Clockmaster is a bit different. He'll freeze time and teleport to your location every time he yells time is money, which not only is really hard to work around when you're trying to avoid other guests, but also because if he teleports in front of you when you're already running from a different guest you bumped into, you're basically screwed. This is by far the soul that requires the most planning. You have to hit him at just the right time, when people are in just the right spots where you can move around them. Because with the amount of ground you need to cover, it's going to take a lot of square footage to make everything work. With the amount of map checking I'm doing to see where everybody is, combined with the route planning, this feels like if somebody combined Pikmin and Five Nights at Freddy's. Swap out the map for a monitor and it's basically the same thing. I love this soul just because of the amount of forethought that has to go into it, devising exactly how you'll get around him and which parts of the hotel he'll run off to. And at this point in my game, getting past all of the guests was hard considering there were nearly 10 that wanted me dead. It's ludicrous and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Luckily, with the speed up you can buy from the Gregory shop, getting him to use his ability 3 times is a breeze. And after I had successfully made an old man go conscious, I had looted his body and quickly ran over to where his unprotected son was and mugged him. Since Clockmaster was out, he couldn't be summoned in to stop me from getting the soul from my son. And we learned the screwdriver was actually given to my son in the event Clockmaster's screw comes loose. So we make a deal, screwdriver for soul and we get out of there. But not before he immediately double crosses me, chasing me upstairs, leading me into Cactus Gunman and throws flowers at me, beautiful. Clockmaster actually gives you a unique item if you loot his corpse though. The golden stopwatch isn't a key item, but it might as well be. This thing will let you travel slightly forward in time. Not that impactful overall, but if you're getting chased and you need a quick way to escape, this does the charm. Using it though does sacrifice a little bit of your mental gauge. It was especially useful for getting Angel Devil Dog's soul because it's complete lunacy. So unlike all of these other souls, I'll explain to you how to get it and then tell you all of my problems with it. At 6 PM, Angel Devil Dog will go into the lounge and put her soul down to watch TV. But you can't go in there and grab it because Gregory interrupts her, making her pick it up. So what you have to do is go into the storeroom, grab the dirty magazine he confiscated from you earlier, show it to him right before he enters the room, then as he's going to the storeroom instead of inside the lounge, you can dodge in there quickly and grab it. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, for starters, this is the only soul in the entire game that's time dependent. Yes, other souls require you to wait for the perfect time in order to strike like Clockmaster, but this is the only one that happens at one point during the day only. So if you miss your window, you have no other choice but to wait until it becomes 6. No, you can't just sleep until it becomes that time because there's a great chance you'll overshoot and miss your window. But also you can't go back to sleep immediately after waking up. So what I ended up doing was just waiting in the nearest safest room to where the lounge was, which is the Judgment Factory. I literally just have to sit in order to continue the game. It's stupid. Yes, if I planned this stuff out better, I could have prevented this wait, but how was I supposed to know she would only go in there at 6? Furthermore, I didn't understand that the dirty magazine would be used twice. I just thought that was a one-time thing to get the self-help book and that it'd be over with. I didn't figure it would be a key item that would open up 2 different locks. So when I found it again, I didn't think of it being useful at all. And lastly, 6 PM is also when Catherine and Mummy Papa go to the nurse's office, which is right across from the lounge. So there's a really good chance when you're waiting for Gregory in the hallway, you'll bump into one of them and accidentally go into a horror show, meaning you'll lay there for like 5 hours missing your window again, and going back to your judgment corner. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said there was a way worse puzzle, because this just sucks, okay? Which is lame because honestly, this is the only complaint I have thus far. I've loved this game outside of those 2 stupid puzzles, but making me wait like this is dumb and I've wasted several gigabytes of my hard drive capturing it. After a literal hour of waiting, that's not exaggeration, that's just how long this soul took, I finally nabbed it off the bastard hyena and gave it to death. Which instead of his usual rigmarole of saying more guests have moved in after you gave him the last soul for the night, he'll leave without saying anything, revealing the final guest to be Judgment Boy Gold. Okay. This would be way cooler if his voice actor wasn't the same as the regular Judgment Boy, which as I've already discussed, sounds like like ass. That wasn't even a thing from the show. They changed actors between regular Judgment Boy and Gold. This still wouldn't be an issue if his voice wasn't dumb. He resides all the way down at the very last floor of the basement, so that's where we'll be headed to. Once we finally reach him and talk to him instead of the Judgment like you would expect, he summons in 2 regular Judgment Boys and they all go in circles asking you random questions. This is the point in the game where peeking on guests as well as the show knowledge is rewarded. They'll ask you trivia about the guests and it won't be easy obvious ones like, who is the rat one? It'll be more in the line of, if Catherine was on a date, who would it be with? Now, I didn't peek on Catherine very much, but because I watched season 4 of the show, I knew she had a crush on Hell's Chef. So I went with that one, and I was right. That's really cool, but then the second question was, if you see Catherine eating in the dining hall, what would she be eating? Which feels way too out there in my opinion. But after answering enough questions from the Judgment Boys, Judgment Boy Gold pipes up and asks one final question, and gives you an upskirt shot. But after getting it correct, he drops the final heart and relinquishes the soul, which finally gets you all 12. After sleeping with death, he tells you the way out of here. The front doors, which were originally locked, have now been set free and you can finally get out of this hell. All of the guests are gone too, except for Neko Zombie. If you go in and talk to him, he'll tell you that he's happy you've made it this far. Most of the humans that show up usually give up at some point in their quest and become permanent guests. And reaffirms what Death had said, that your exit is right beyond those doors. But they don't budge. Yeah, it turns out Mama's a little upset with us for throwing a wrench in her whole soul-sucking operation, and dings us up over the head. And as she does this, the door cracks slightly, foreshadowing ooh la la. You get locked deep down into the basement in this secluded room, which has a fun electric chair. Also, Umbaba's unanimated corpse is just chilling in here, I guess. Sure. Fortunately, they left you completely unguarded, and this area also leads to the very top of Gregory House, where all of her souls are, which is also completely unguarded. What was the plan here? Up here, you can also find all sorts of doodads, like health restoring items, speed ups, and most importantly, the Key of Hope, which lets you out of the basement and things have gotten noticeably more red. Back up to the lobby again, Mama's waiting for you, and we get the game's first and last boss fight. Mama will teleport around trying to hit you with her staff, and shoot fireballs at you. It might look like a proper fight, but believe you me, this is no different from the puzzles you've come to expect from the game. You see, you can't damage her or even attack her, so you're left to your own devices to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And after a minute or two of walking around in circles, I put 2 and 2 together in my head. I realized her snapping the door back there was foreshadowing, ooh la la. When she does her fireball move, you'll have to run in front of the door, which she'll damage it. After every hit it takes, she'll get more and more angry and attack faster with the same pattern of trying to hit you with this stick. Luckily, it only drains the mental gauge and you get like a bajillion health items in the spirit room, so who really cares? After enough hits on the door, it cracks open and you can escape. But just because you're outside doesn't mean you're free. Gregory transforms into that spirit from season 1 and starts trying to convince you to stay, procedurally draining the mental gauge with his belittlement and deprecation. But we're able to push through it all and make it to the area between dimensions. But right before Death sends us out of here, we decline, claiming we still have a little bit of unfinished business to attend to. And our main character actually goes back for Neko Zombie, but he's content with where he is, and tells you to escape on your own. And then the rest of the game is just recycled footage from the show. I mean, it's like all of the other cutscenes where it's dubbed over to give it new context, but still, reused footage is reused footage. It's hard to be invested when I already know what's gonna happen. Neko Zombie burns Gregory House to the ground like in season 2, but unlike the show, our main character actually gets out. And as they're going home, they have a monologue about how they kind of like the hotel. The warmness of the fear, the something of the something else, yeah, you know where this one goes. They're going back to Gregory House, yeah. Yeah, I know it's the entire gimmick of the series that nobody can really leave Gregory House, but I'm really getting tired of it. A series that always makes you return to square one after escaping. You know, that'd be a really good formula for a roguelite. Foreshadowing is a narrative device in so that's Gregory Horror Show Soul Collector. Genuinely, I did not expect this to be as good as it was. The puzzles, the atmosphere, the style have all aged immaculately. This could be put on Steam today, and if it was in a higher resolution, I would not stop to question it at all. Honestly, one of the best games from this era I've ever played. Genuinely, it concerns me with how good this game is, because why did they want nobody in America to play it? Were we just bad that year and we didn't earn it? If you like puzzle games, or just want to play an unholy amalgam between Five Nights at Freddy's, Pikmin, and Baldi's Basics, then shit man, this one's for you. Genuinely could not recommend this one more to any of you. I don't think me talking about the game really ruins the experience either. Those organic events like accidentally bumping into somebody in the hall then running into somebody else will happen whether I talk about it or not. Furthermore, they could not happen to you at all. You could not have to suffer a single horror show during the entire game. It's all dependent on how you play. Pretty much nothing is scripted. Right, I've spent enough time gushing. You can figure out the game is good by now. And this is where I thought initially when coming up with the idea for this video that Gregory Horror Show was over. over. Make a short little video for something I like, make it extra spooky for Halloween, and then it was to my horror, surprise, and slight dismay that there was so much more bullshit to this series. There's a Gregory Horror Show mobile phone game in 2018, only released in Japan. There is a manga, there's another video game exclusive to Japan as well. There's a pissing board game. Right, I say we take a break from all of the actual conversation about the series and take a look at the stupid dumb board game, because why not? I guess this is my second board game review for the channel. At least I hope it is, because I'm scripting this in August and I have no idea what I'm making between October and now. So, I attempted playing the board game, which is officially known as the Collectible Game Experience. Okay, sure. And I attempted to play this over a Discord call with two of my good pally friend pals, and it literally could not have gone worse. We sat there for an hour just reading the fucking rules. Look, I'm gonna cut to the chase and just say it didn't go well. Also, I lost all the footage. That's the end of my review. I have no one in real life to play this with. Wow, that really was a Gregory Horror Show board game. And for the record, I am not scripting this bit ahead of me actually playing it because I want to get this video done. Right, I say we move on to the second Gregory Horror Show game. Gregory Horror Show, as the wiki refers to it, G mode. I'm not Japanese. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't play this in any way that's comfortable for either of us. I could totally just whip out my phone every 2 seconds and translate what's on screen, but that would be super inconvenient for me and not exactly the greatest viewing experience for you. The game just seems whatever from what I can tell, as good as a mobile phone game from 2004 could possibly be. So I'm immediately moving over to some more nonsense in Japan I can't read. But actually I lied more, because this is the Gregory Horror Show manga I mentioned earlier. Fortunately for us, unlike that mobile game, I totally could have played if I put more than an hour of effort into it. This one actually has a fan translation. Thank you so much for everybody on Tumblr who made reading this possible. Everybody who worked on this is on screen now. Give them all, I don't know, hugs if you see them in real life. This is Gregory Horror Show Another World. This time around, we're given way more detail on the character's backstory right at the start. This is Toru, I'm far too white to pronounce this last name, and he is what Japan refers to as a freeder. It's anyone between 18 and 34 who doesn't have a job, basically. More commonly referred to in America as a NEET. Someone who is not in employment, enrolled, or in training. So basically this guy's a 4chaner. And for the last couple of weeks, he's been desperately searching for any hotel or apartment that'll let him stay. And because he literally cannot pay them, nobody's letting him in. It's until he's begging this old man who owns one of the apartments that he accidentally knocks him over onto the floor and he suggests the perfect place for him to stay. None other than Gregory House. Gregory, who looks like this now, and this old man are in cahoots with one another. Like, so far I've read the first chapter and I've already picked that up. I don't need to read further to know that's true. This guy brings Gregory wayward souls in exchange for something, probably. And I love Toru because he does the only logical thing anybody in this series has done. He just goes, yeah, nah man, fuck this, I'm out. But is convinced to check it out anyways because he has no other options. That's the end of the first chapter, and it really only serves to set up Toru and how he got into this mess. Speaking of mess, every character got a redesign. Most of them I'm indifferent to, and a lot of them look downright horrible. Let's start with Gregory, since he's obviously the first one introduced. And I like it. He looks a little too young in my opinion. Like if I only knew this design, you could tell me he's 20 and I would believe you. But he doesn't look bad, all things considered, since you'll come to realize pretty soon that our standards are not high. Chapter 2, Catherine has Toru walking around getting introduced to everybody. Distinctly not getting the same room as every other guest in the series, represented by the cat painting not being on the wall above the bed. As Gregory shows him around, he does his regular Gregoryisms, like making small talk with the main character and being pseudo-threatening. And we need to talk about the art man, because look at this panel. If they were going for an off-putting art style, then bravo, but if they weren't, ew. I'm going to assume it was the former and move on, because this is, if I mustn't remind you, a horror series. And throughout that lens, everything looks really nice. Even if I don't like the character designs they're drawing, I can still admire the art regardless. Toru talks about his dreams and why he came to the city from the country in the first place. Apparently he's here because he wants to be a writer, or a musician. It doesn't really seem like he's decided yet. It's already clear that he has huge ambitions for greatness, but doesn't really know what he wants to become. After that, him and Gregory have a scuffle, which leads to him deciding that this place is exactly that cool after all, and decides to leave. Which has him bump into Catherine, and oh my god, Catherine. I'm sorry to all of the BBW warriors in the audience, but Catherine got too Ozempic. They slimmed her right the fuck out, and honestly, I don't like it at all. I understand all of these characters had to be translated from the blocky papergraph style into a more realistic one to match with the art style, and I'm totally okay with that, but this one's way too far removed. I could have been told that they were sisters, and it probably would have checked out. This one got changed way too much. I'm not a fan. After being peer pressured, he decides to stay, which leads us into Chapter 3, Gunman, Chef, Doll. Which wacky characters could this one be about? Toru wakes up and is informed break breakfast is being served in the dining hall, which lets us get a peek at a bunch of new redesigns. First off, Cactus Gunman. He's pretty much around the same as last time, just more human proportioned. About what you'd imagine for him. After Gunman starts shooting at him, he forcibly gets sat down by Hell's Chef and oh my god. Hell's Chef. I see why Catherine was in love with you in season 4. They turned the funny candle with a knife into a f***ing dilf. He also received an actual personality. His food might look horrible and disgusting, but apparently it's quite good. Yes, it paralyzes you, but I think it's worth it if it means he picks me up in his giant man arms and hand feeds me. After he gets paralyzed briefly, Catherine gets HR called on her and we sit down with Gregory, as he starts laying into him about what's wrong in that little noggin of Turu's. Like in the show, every character relates heavily to our main character. Gunman wants to be the best, Hell's Chef wants to make the best food, Catherine hasn't eaten anything in 30 days. How does that all relate to him? Well, if you recall the previous chapter, you would know he had visions of grandeur, but not really what that is. And that's because our main character suffers from our little friend known as envy. That's why it doesn't matter to him what he becomes as long as he's noteworthy, because he wants to be seen and be better than others. After this, he goes on a little smoke break where he sees a girl outside of his window, and since he's a stupid f***ing Redder, he immediately goes awooga eyes and wants to date her, which triggers Lost Doll to bring him and attack him. Chapter over. And already I'm loving this. It captures the same energy and spirit the show had while expanding upon it in a lot of great ways, like the main character actually talking and having a name. He's about as passive as Jim was, but about as involved as Kim was at the same time. So far, he's the perfect blend between the two protagonists. And because of all of these things, it's way easier for me to become invested in him and actually care about his fate. That's not to say I didn't like Jim or Kim, but I can actually see this guy, so that's a plus. Anyway, chapter 4, Body. Turu needs a job or else he can't pay rent and Gregory will kick him out. I doubt he actually would, but I think he's just trying to threaten him. When suddenly one of the residents beckons him over, saying he'll pay him to clean the room that they're staying in. When he enters, it's empty with a voice talking to him from underneath the bedsheets. They talk about how Turu chasing his dreams is a waste of time, and that he should just be like him and give up, because no matter what you do, you're gonna die anyways. So they do nothing but mope about it in their bed. And while they're talking, we get some really cool illustrations showing off how Turu could die, like accidentally getting run over by a gun or shot by a car, until one of the illustrations almost actually kills him, and he breaks through the game, revealing the guy in the bed was a zombie the whole time. They're afraid to live, they're afraid to die. A perfect portrayal of our protagonist. Both overwhelmed with options, wanting to do something bigger, but ending up doing nothing. Even if Toru won't accept or admit it, that's the reality he's come to live. A way more straightforward chapter with not a ton going on, but more of a supplementary one meant to reinforce the main idea. The main character wants to do everything and anything, but is too scared to, but at the same time doesn't want to do nothing either. Scared to live, scared to die. Boom, it's perfect. Chapter 5, Zombie Cat. We get to see as Toru tries a new job as a street vendor, which he immediately quits because it's too hard. Well, he doesn't quit, but he's still technically inside Gregory house, and this guy coming up to tell him that he can take the rest of the day off is probably his mentality for quitting or something. This is a great time to bring up the manga's version of Gregory house. It works slightly differently than the one we're used to. We get to see outside areas like the city and this girl walking down the street. I could imagine there's no way for him to leave Gregory house truly. Like he can walk outside, but I don't think any of that is really real. Still, it's a cool way to show new areas and not have some Looney Tune nonsense like the entire desert inside one room. Even though I must admit that was way funnier. Anyway, after taking his leave, he comes across Neko Zombie running a goldfish scooping stand. I didn't know what this was, and if you're an American like me, I doubt you know what this is either, so let me explain it. You try to catch goldfish with this thing called a poi. The poi is a paper net, and the strategy comes from not scooping too fast or forcefully lest you break the net. Catch as many goldfish until you get bored and leave. At least that's as good as a description I can give based off reading this Wikipedia article. But because this is Gregory house and everything has to have some kind of messed up measures behind it, he's transported into a pond and given a giant poi. When he starts magically getting mocked by giant versions of what I can assume are his parents, talking about how every goldfish he's gotten, he's always neglected and never taken care of them, not even taking one out of the bag it came in. Then Neko Zombie jumps in and starts chastising him about letting all of the fish die, and then turns into a giant turtle to attack him. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Neko Zombie in this. I'm pretty indifferent to the redesign. It's about how I'd imagine him to look, just more rounded off than before, but his character got absolutely nuked. He doesn't act like Neko Zombie at all, taunting Toro, outright attacking him. This isn't Neko Zombie. Neko Zombie would be trying to help him escape and flat out telling him what's wrong in his mind, not attacking him and delivering it through crypticism. Speaking of which, what is the message of this whole thing? Well, after Neko Turtle buzzes off for a second, we actually get to look at all of the fish below him, and all of them are once dreams he had. All of the different professions he wanted to become until eventually he starts getting chased by Turtle Zombie again, and attempts to catch a fish that's far too big and breaks his net. Bset. This whole ploy is a representation of his failed dreams and aspirations. All of the fish he's killed are dreams he's squandered. Passing passions come and gone. All of these different things he's wanted to be, but due to lack of commitment have not been seen through. Eventually he tries to catch a fish the size of his net and it breaks, representing his dreams being far too big for him to pull off. He's biting off way more than he can chew. Also represented with him quitting his job at the very beginning. You see, isn't it cool how everything ties back together like a cute little bow? And how they decide to end this chapter is by having him sit down on a bench messing around with the fish that he won when suddenly some random girl comes out of nowhere and says he's her dad. Chapter over. Instead of spending a second of thought on that, I'm going to instead talk about something else. I'm not against them changing the personalities of certain characters. I'm not sure if you noticed, but they did it for Cactus Gunman and Hell's Chef. Cactus Gunman is usually obsessed with love, but now he wants to be the best at anything. And Hell's Chef didn't really have a personality or talk, which is two things he does now. Them changing or adding characters to the guests isn't a problem in my mind. Hell, it can even be a good thing if it ties into the main character. But Neko Zombie was probably the second most important guest, and for him to just be a random goon now in the hotel kind of defeats his entire purpose. He was the only ally the main character had. Now he's just playing with fish, it sucks. Wait a second though, if he's the second most important guest, who's the most important? Well, that's the subject of the next chapter, Judgment Boy. Oh, Jesus Christ, what is that? As if them changing his voice actor wasn't enough, what did they do to him? Before I talk about the affront to God I briefly flashed on screen, I want to talk about Judgment Boy's character design and why it worked. It not only worked, it was one of my favorites of the series. Just look at him for a second for me. Most characters in the hotel are at least vaguely human. Catherine and Neko Zombie are both anthropomorphic animals. Lost Doll is almost a child. Roulette Boy is just a kid with a circle on his head. Most of them have basic human shapes. But then some go against that, like TV Fish. And even with TV Fish though, it's still resembling an animal that exists in real life. With that in mind, what even is Judgment Boy? A spiked top almost resembling a hat smoothly leads into a square face with black eyeliner. Sharp teeth fill a waxing crescent mouth, leading down to a shirt that says Judgment Day on it. On both sides having what should be arms, but in actuality are just two chandelier-esque poles with ball joints leading into cages containing a heart and a dollar sign. And at the very bottom having two 5-ton weights, both interconnected by chains. This design is absolutely all over the place in a good way. It feels like pieces haphazardly and without thought jabbed into a mold, with 10 tons of weight at the bottom guaranteeing the scales will always be balanced. You might say it's all over the place, nonsensical, overly complex, and I would agree. That's kind of the thing, it's not supposed to resemble anything but itself. Judgment Boy isn't supposed to be humanoid or anthropomorphic or really anything. It's supposed to be this hodgepodge of different nonsense morphed into something vaguely resembling scales. All of its sharp edges make it look so unapproachable, mix this with a deadpan voice and near lack of personality, and you have yourself a winner for a character. So, what happened here? Toro's supposed daughter is talking to him when he lights a cigarette and throws it onto the ground haphazardly. When out of nowhere, fake Judgment Boy appears and starts judging him for this action. It's like they removed all of his swag. Instead of his hair being nearly plastered onto his head like before, it now moves outwards, giving the design more depth, yes, but taking it away from that rigidness it once had. Moreover, he now has a circular head and body, completely destroying everything. Before, I wouldn't judge you if you said he was a machine at first glance, with him living on a track and having a boxy design. But they made him humanoid and it completely takes away from all of that. At least he still has the elements of the previous design, like the pole arm joints and 5-ton weights. Look, long story short, they removed all of his coolness. Instead of his typical judgments, he starts laying him out. Actually, you know what? I'm not done. I'm going off script. They definitely could have just kept his boxy looking design for the manga. I honestly don't think he needed a redesign for this at all just because of how he was. Like, if you put Catherine in here, yeah, it looked really out there and weird. But since Judgment Boy is already so alien, I honestly don't think it would have been that out of place if he was still boxy and looked like the papercraft stuff. Look, you get the point. I'm moving forward. Instead of the typical judgment, he starts laying into him about what could happen if he just mindlessly flicks a very much still on fire cigarette, yelling about the whole outside market burning down. Ooh, scary, ah. One design change I actually think is pretty cool though is that instead of him being on a chain, since he's in the middle of a town, he's on what I could imagine as a clothesline or telephone pole. I don't know, but I just think it's a neat touch since there's nothing for his chain to attach to. They pick up the cigarette and throw it into an ashtray as they peel out. Once they get a chance to sit down, she starts dissecting his character and continuously calling him dad. Even though by the looks of it, she's at least 15, and he is, as stated, 22, so I have absolutely no idea how that could have happened. Whilst Doll jumps on his head, which she pulls off of him, he pointlessly regurgitates that he is in fact not the father. Gregory confirms she's not a guest currently staying at the hotel. They kill a fish, and she moves in. Cool. Not a lot to discern from this chapter outside of Disgusting Boy. It really only served to introduce New Girl. And I don't even have to read the next chapter to assume where it's going. I already know by this title. Chapter 7, James. Alright, I'm just gonna predict where this is going before I actually read it. James is a metaphor for Kim being scared of starting a family, and I could imagine he plays a very similar role here, since Toru having an unknown child has just been brought into question. This chapter opens with Toru talking on the phone with one of his old high school buds. They're chastising him because he's stupid and moved into the city without a plan or job. It's obviously not who he thinks it is because the only phone in this damn hotel is sentient and pilfers you, until a bastard child comes out of nowhere and smacks the phone away from him. And then they just start talking like nothing happened, sure, whatever. When suddenly, times like these, I really wish this was in color. James appears and starts running amok. Toru obviously isn't having any of this, but the still unnamed girl plays into it, offering to play tag with him, which he immediately tries to kill them, because this is Gregory house. Until Gregory eventually interrupts them, saying he's just an innocent child, and that ignorance and innocence play into one another, which circles back to the beginning where his friend was judging him for moving to the city without a goal. Ignorance mixed with innocence. That also means I was completely off with what I thought they were going to do with James entirely. Drat. I would simply go back and remove that from my script, but unfortunately all of my videos are written with acrylic ink, so I cannot. You already know how this works at this point. Something happens at the beginning of the chapter, then there's a character that is indicative of Toru, and everything ties back into each other with a big metaphor about the character. Something greater of note though is that after Toru nearly gets blown up, random girl treats his hand and finally introduces herself. Her name is Kimiko last name and has seemingly dropped the father-daughter thing for now, which is good because I refuse to accept the idea that somebody looks like this could possibly get any action at some point. Oh yeah, James's redesign. It looks exactly how you would imagine it would. And this next chapter is an immediate curveball because it focuses on Trap Mouse and Bonsai Kabuki for some reason. Remember Bonsai, that random one-off character from Season 2? Or Trap Mouse, that one character also introduced in Season 2 that wasn't even on screen until Season 3? There's only 4 chapters left including this one, and I personally would have chosen to focus on some more minor but still big characters. TV Fish, Clockmaster, Mummy Dog, any of them. Whatever, what they do with them is pretty cool. Bonsai Kabuki looks pretty much on par with how he did before, just as slightly racist as always. But Trap Mouse, what happened? This isn't in the same way of Judgment Boy though. That was Twink Death. This is Twink Birth. He has a skin-tight turtleneck now, and honestly, I kind of love this. He has these dumbass little skates, and he's basically a con man who's convincing people to bury all of their money. Like, I have literally no idea how this shit ties into the main character at all, but it's really funny. Toru has taken up a new job of digging holes for a landscaping company. And while he's doing this, Kimiko is talking to him, and Kabuki starts doing some funky stuff. By the way, I've already talked about the art, but the art during this sequence specifically is incredible looking. Like, just look at how it twists and contorts Toru. I love it. I especially like this one panel where the entire shot is just him next to some fish and he's entirely silhouetted. A little callback to Fish being Dreams thing from earlier. And as he comes to, out of nowhere, he's now in Roulette Boy's board game, being made to play his life. Oh yeah, Chapter 9, Roulette Boy. Okay, so this is kind of where the localization ends for now, somewhat. The last one came out 3 years ago, so I can imagine they're still working on it. Luckily, that's just for the physical illustrations, though. There's still a translation attached to all of the pages on the website. It's just the actual pieces of art that are still in Japanese for now. So for the last little bit of this, just enjoy the eye candy as I try to read this stuff at you. The board game works kind of similarly to how it did in Soul Collector. You have to roll dice, and whoever gets to the end first wins. But the difference is they have to get their respective ages. So Toru has to get to 22, and Gregory has to get to like 50 or 70 probably. Okay, so I'm just gonna get this out of the light. Roulette Boy's redesign. Puberty shot him right the f up. Oh my god. Honestly, I'm a fan. I just think this one looks cool. I'm just gonna say it. It doesn't have the same charm as the original, but I think I can trade that for looking slightly more threatening. He gives me more of a Wednesday Addams vibe now. Since this is also going over the characters' lives, we get to know a little bit more about Gregory here too. It's nothing major, and I doubt anybody would really care, but I still think it's cool. Like when he was a child, he was a kleptomaniac. That's awesome. Enough about the rat. This is about Toru and his sad, pathetic life. At age 7, he gets a crush on a teacher. At age 14, he gets glasses. At age 18, he rolls into college. And at age 22, he graduates. Yeah, Gregory was too busy getting blown up to win, so Toru pulls ahead. But the game doesn't end there. Roulette Boy keeps going and rolling for him, going through his entire life. That same year, he gets hired with a big company. Age 25, he gets married. Age 28, he has 2 kids. Age 49, his kids have moved out and it's just back to him with his wife. And finally, age 50. His wife died and he's stuck in an endless loop of doing work. Day in, day out, same thing every time. And as he gets this information, we get this absolutely horrid image of him recoiling in pain at this revelation. This art is seriously incredible, man. As we keep getting shots of him going in and out of work, Roulette Boy keeps taunting him, giving him narration. You don't like it. It's painful. Hate it. Hate it. You want help. It's so bone-chilling. I adore this. Until finally, Roulette Boy says he finds another way to get his dreams and he returns to 22. This is probably my favorite chapter of the entire thing, just because of how incredible the imagery and writing is. Like, damn, you really did that shit for no reason. Alright, Roulette Boy, I was unfamiliar with your game. Alright, we're on the home stretch now. Chapter 10, Angel and Devil. This one picks up immediately after the last one where Gregory and Toru are at a table playing the game. As he's having a bit of a mental breakdown, he's decided it's about time he's left this place, as Gregory pipes up asking him where he'll go outside of here. Is there anywhere for him to go out of here? As they argue, Angel Devil Dog appears. They've changed drastically. Instead of the previous nice but actually mean kind of thing she had going on before, now they're 2 different characters, Angel Dog and Devil Dog. They're like the angel and devil on your shoulder kind of thing, both of them grabbing Toru, trying to convince him to stay and leave, tearing him in half, creating 2 separate versions of him, at least metaphorically, representing that the hotel has split him on what he should do. One of them wants to try and change the future and avoid what they saw, while the other one has accepted their fate and wants to stay at the hotel. As they fight, Gregory laughs at them as Kimiko comes into the room and interrupts them, realizing that he really isn't her dad after all, and she doesn't think she has a family. And that's when Toru realizes that that's his mom? Apparently. They join back together as one person and follow her through the doors. So for the first time, he actually has a dream. He knows what he wants to do, and that's to get out of here with his mom, maybe. When he tries, he appears in an empty room with an urn. At least I think that's an urn, I have no idea. As visions of everything that's happened to him up to this point plays, he reaches out for his mom as they both run for the door. And as they make it out of the forest, they see silhouettes of every guest they've encountered up till now. And we finally begin the final chapter. Chapter 11, Gregory again. This one stars them trying to escape through the woods as visions of previous guests haunt over them. As they run, more guests begin attacking him as he starts to float away, and as they're berating him, he finally admits something, that he's just young and confused and needs help. And as this happens, we flash forward to when he's much older. We get a shot of Kimiko feeding a fish in a fishbowl, a representation of his dreams finally being nurtured, by who else than his wife. This family tree is so screwed. So he's not her dad, she's not his mom, but in reality they are married and both of them end up in Gregory house. Fucking whatever, fine. Their 2 kids are visiting as he steps out to take a smoke break. As his family sits around and has tea, he gets asked if he's alright. And when he looks down to people walking around, he sees Hell's Chef before rubbing his glasses and realizing he's not there. And claims he's fine now that he's not alone. Yeah, he goes back to Gregory house though. And the manga ends. Awesome. So, there might be one thing on your mind after all of that, and I'm here to affirm it, because yes, I didn't talk about Angel Devil Dog's new design. Yeah, it's fine, whatever. But what might actually be on your mind is what the hell was any of that? I really enjoyed this book series, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. A lot of the redesigns look really messed up. I don't like some of the mischaracterizations. And that story was really hard to follow. Like, was it really necessary to change the relationship between Toru and Kimiko 3 times? But looking at it for what it is, it's really special. It just has so much charm and character to it. The Roulette Boy chapter still gives me chills. Honestly, if it ended there, I would have considered this thing to be perfect. Well, not perfect, but you get what I mean. I just wish they could have told this story a bit more plainly. I mean, the series isn't really known for laying out the story for you, but this is a book, not a show. They are meant to be consumed chronologically. These are meant to have an interconnecting story where the main character is largely important. Telling us things flat out wouldn't have been bad, but looking past my complaints, I really do like this a lot. I would recommend it if I didn't just tell you everything. Okay, so what's next? Death. So you might have noticed earlier when I was raffling things off that there wasn't a ton to talk about outside of the game and show, and you would be correct, because right here is when it falls off and dies. That manga was made in 2007, and it was pretty much the death of the franchise. By the way, for comparison, I was born that year. Of course, Mr. Iwata wouldn't just stop making things. He went on to go make a Japanese exclusive midnight horror show, which I cannot watch, because, if I must reiterate in this video, I am not Japanese, and Cartoon Network's kids show called Piccola. Great. Now, I can't really find anything specifically for why they stopped making things for Greg, but I can speculate. Gregory Horror Show isn't exactly the easiest to get into. I mean, for pretty much all of the show, it relies on viewers to decipher the story. Then for season 3 and 4, it's pretty much no story. The only only game in English didn't make it to the US. Then the manga, and I'm pretty sure everything else about the series stayed in Japan, except for the board game. Thank God I can play the board game. And the Zippo. So that's just it then. Greg is dead. Honestly, I think this franchise's Achilles heel is accessibility. It's so hard for people to get into the series just because of how weird it is. It doesn't matter that it's an incredible franchise with memorable and zany characters. What matters is it's not appealing to a wide demographic. Simply put, horror comedy isn't an appealing genre. Or at least it wasn't! People nowadays on the internet, even though the community is small, love Gregory Horror Show. Yeah, I know it's not perfect, and it's kind of hard to get into, but I can really see all of this for what it's trying to be. A really wacky and unique horror series. And it just so happens a lot of other people saw it for that as well. But to explain that, I'll need to take you all back to the scariest month of them all. The middle of May. A Kickstarter was made by the series creator Naomi Owada for not only a Gregory Horror Show movie, but also a new game, Soul of Roses. Yeah, okay, this Kickstarter failed, but another one was started just for Soul of Roses this time, asking for 5 million yen, or about $28,000, for a translated version of the game in the US. They still need to, finish the game, but this would be funding a translated version as well. And fortunately, this time around, they actually got the money they needed. And because I'm a good little scallop that was far too dedicated to this topic, I got one of the higher tiers on here. Which also means I got some cool goodies that I really hope get here in time for this video. If I don't, I'll just put them to my community posts. Like a t-shirt, keychain, a physical members card, 1 out of 20 trading cards, my name in the end credits, and a cool excuse to spend $350. Now, was that necessary? Yes, it was, because it let me play a closed beta of the game releasing in August of this year, which is technically ahead of when I'm currently scripting this, but I don't care, there's still the end of the damn game. So, the version of Soul of Roses I'm about to talk about is a beta, so keep that in mind. It is not a finished version of the game. Also keep in mind, I was writing this part of the video during September, and come October 1st, the game got a demo I can not only show footage of, but I can talk about easier because I can show footage of. That's right, screw you, month-old version of me. This is Gregory Horror Show, Soul of Roses, demo. This time around, we're not playing as a human like you might think. In fact, one of the zombies from the show who had just woken up through the floor. Apparently, there's been a recent trend of these renovating revenants popping through every piece of Gregory house. That's because of this new thingy that's popped up on the outskirts of the property. What other than the Soul of Roses itself? It keeps launching its pieces of soul at different creatures and guests and turning them against Gregory House. Most commonly zombies, though. Fortunately, you're one of the more zenful zomfolk instead of one of those conniving cadavers. Your current objective given to you by Gregory is to go through the various stages and bring down the Soul of Roses, a way removed plot from everything else in the series, but since it's a roguelite, I can excuse it. There's pretty much no story, just a goalpost, but for a game that's meant to be replayed over and over, I can excuse it. It's honestly kind of weird playing a Gregory Horror Show game that doesn't have a plot, considering that's what the series is most known for, but I digress. Let's actually play the video game. Zomboid has a very limited range of movement. You can jump, do a neutral attack, do a special attack, and a skill attack, which needs time to charge. Do an invulnerable dash, and drop down dealing damage to whatever is below you. This is just Dead Cells, isn't it? Okay, only kind of yes. That's because the main gimmick of the game, outside of it being a continuation to a franchise which hasn't received a new installment in this country within nearly 2 decades, is the soul absorbability. It lets you take the ability from any enemy, giving you a unique neutral, special, and skill for every enemy in the game. The best way I can describe this is that if you mixed Kirby with Dead Cells, the copy ability from Kirby as well as pretty much everything else from Dead Cells, I cannot describe to you how cool this is. That's a lie, I can. Just for this demo, there are dozens of abilities you can get. Zombie with a bottle, it gives you a projectile, this pill that makes things explode and has a giant hammer. And they don't just do this for new characters. Every character throughout the entire series history shows up. You have your obvious picks like Catherine, Neko Zombie, James, Judgment Boy, looking garbage as ever. Characters like them are a shoo-in. But then there's completely out there picks, like Toilet Baby, who appears twice in the series, or Bonehead, who only appears once. Bonehead has an entire moveset. Roulette Boy has an entire moveset. Catherine, Fritz, Hanawa Salaryman. If they are in the show, they are here. Now, for a Kirby game having this many copy abilities, it's pretty much expected, but that's a Nintendo franchise. I'm aware they're made by HAL Laboratory and not developed internally, but by and large, it's a Nintendo franchise. Something on that scope is pretty on par with what they make, but this is an indie game, people. If this image posted to Naomi Owada's Twitter is anything to go off of, that means there's going to be roughly 50 copy abilities in the final game. And they really could have stopped at returning characters, but they went further. There are new guys in here too, like this blue dude who's named Lucifer for some reason, Alice in the box, and a wardrobe that is actually a tank. Try relating that to a main character. It astounds me with how far they went with this idea. And it doesn't just end with being a good idea in concept, because it works flawlessly in execution. The game is great from what I'm able to experience through this demo. I will admit though, it does feel a tad button mashy since you really only have 3 attacks, but I'll forgive it since, if we're counting every character, there's technically over like 130 attacks in total. Well, yes, that number is high, not a ton of them feel fully realized. Medical Ogre, or whatever the pill hammer guy was called, is whatever. With his ability, you can swing your hammer, swing it but it doesn't do any damage, instead plants a bomb, and explode yourself. They all kind of do the same thing when you boil it down, but at the same time, this is still a demo, so there's a chance these complaints can be fixed. Regardless of whatever problems I may have, around 50 abilities is still around 50 abilities. Plain and simple, that's impressive. Something else I love is the bond system. You see, randomly a bunch of notable guests will be chilling in the lobby. They'll have some fun dialogue for you to go through, and Gregory will give a brief explanation on them. But if you give them a ramen cup you can find on your runs, your bond will go up with them. And from the mirror man near the entrance, you can select which bond you'll have. What bonds actually do is give you a fun ability throughout your entire run. So if you give Catherine some noodles, you can have 10 extra hearts. Or if you give them to Hanwa Salaryman, you'll be faster for 8 seconds after getting a kill. This is honestly so cool, and encourages replayability so much because I'm always interested in seeing what guests can give me what perk. But that's not all you can do in the lobby. Speaking with James will let you upgrade a bunch of your random junk, so you can get 2 consecutive dashes, or get a certain amount of health back per room, or a bunch of other nonsense. And there's still more. Gregory Mama over here has some stuff you can play around with too. Every ability has a mastery to it. If you get 30 kills while having that soul, you can use it from the beginning of your run. So if you get 30 kills while you have TV Fish's soul equipped, you can use it from the beginning of all of your runs. All this random junk compiled together makes it so rewarding to consistently jump back in for more. I'm only wording it like that because I've used the word run too much. Why do I have so much stuff to praise? The game isn't even out yet. In order to spice up your limited moves, this game has a Hades-esque ability system. After you blast through one area and grab whatever reward you're given, you usually get a choice between 2 or 3 doors, indicating what reward you'll get from completely clearing out the cavalcade of creatures coming from the carnivorous calla lily. You can get a fire upgrade, poison upgrades, electricity upgrades, list goes on. All of the ways it allows you to mix up your pretty regular attacks is nice. It gives you variety every time you use the same ability. And let's end my positives with the bosses. The only 2 in the demo are Catherine as the mid-boss and Neko Zombie as the final. I will reiterate what I said back during the manga review that having him as a bad guy is really weird, but I will ignore that because his theme is actually incredible. Most of the music in the game is really nothing to raise a picket over, but Neko Zombie's theme specifically was great. Then there's the bosses themselves, and they're pretty good. They're not fantastic, and I think one of my biggest complaints with the whole game is the reason why, but they're good. So what is that complaint then? Game looks kind of ugly. Look at these platforms. Gross. They can definitely pretty it up by the time it fully comes out next year, and I really hope they do because this game needs a facelift. It also makes it kind of hard to telegraph when an enemy is going to attack you, which is also why the bosses are a little poor, but they can definitely fix a lot of this stuff. Because the art style is actually pretty good. I think it successfully meshes the agelessness of the original art style with the modernization of the manga one. With that being said, I do not like some of these new character designs. I'm not sure if I'll run into her during my gameplay, but Lost Doll looks so bad now. I don't even want to use the word ugly or say it misses the point. It just looks bad. Lost Doll's whole thing was that she was a doll looking for a doll that she didn't know she was. So when you're looking at her, you can assume she's just a regular little girl. And then boom, evil, it's perfect. But now you can immediately tell, yep, that's a doll. It's stupid. Or Judgment Boy's looking as round as ever. Some of these I can get behind though, like Gregory here, who's actually one of the better ones. He doesn't look oddly young like his manga iteration anymore. No, he's just Gregory again. He perfectly looks like if I rounded off his design from the original show. I just wish every character could feel like that. But overall, I am very excited for the future of this game, and excited for the future of the series as a whole. If this video has gotten you interested in Gregory at all, then check out the demo and wishlist Soul of Roses on Steam. They want to give this game constant updates for the future, and if enough people support the game, I can honestly see the franchise making a full comeback. It's a free demo, so it really can't hurt to at least try. I love this franchise with all of my heart, and if you want to see it succeed as much as I do, please consider checking out the game. This game seems like it's going to be great when it's done, and I cannot wait to talk about it when it is. But I suppose I have to wait to do that a different Halloween. Gregory Horror Show it's just so weird. It's just so all over the place and wildly different from any other piece of media I found that I just can't help but love it. This is honestly one of my favorite horror franchises just because of how weird and out there and obscure it is. And I really wish it wasn't as obscure as it is because more people need to experience this. I know this is gonna sound like I'm begging super hard, but spread this video around. Get the word out there. The more people checking out this series and by extension Soul of Roses, the better. I want this game to succeed so badly because I want more Gregory content. It has been 2 decades since the last video game based off this series, and I want this one to be a hit. Links in the description below to not only go follow Naomi Iwata's Twitter, the creator of the series and my biological father, but also the Soul of Roses Twitter account. We need more dedicated fans of this series, and I hope through this video, I made some of you them. And hey, if you want more Gregory content I haven't discussed, there's an amazing fan game in the works called Gregory Horror Show Dark Deception, based not only off of the horror game of the same name, but also as a fan-made sequel to Soul Collector. It's free on itch.io, and the team is currently working on chapters 2 and 3, so go support them. But with that, I think I'm ready to let Gregory Horror Show to rest for now, but I'll be back in 2025, just you wait. When that game is done, I'll be right back in this chair to talk about it, mark my words. Okay, bye.